evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Kevin Rigstead, the chairman of the Goffstown Zoning Board of Adjustment, and welcome to our September meeting. I'm going to read some instructions and introductions before we proceed. The Goffstown Zoning Board is an elected board of 5 members and up to 5 appointed alternates. Currently, the board has 5 elected members and 2 alternates. If anyone is interested in serving on the ZBA, please see Derek Horn for more information. The board has a posted agenda for each meeting and tends to follow the items in order. The board will open the public hearing on an application to receive testimony from applicants, abutters, and affected parties, and ask questions about the appeal. The public hearing will then be closed, and the board will enter into a deliberative session to discuss the merits of the appeal. For each application, the board will decide to approve with conditions, deny, or continue to a later meeting. You are welcome to watch the deliberations this evening, or you can contact Derek Horn at Town Hall to get the results. For an applicant's request to be approved, there must be an affirmative vote of at least 3 members. An applicant can request a continuance if there is not a full 5-member board to act on an application. If you are aggrieved by a decision made by the ZBA tonight, you have the right to appeal to the Superior Court. However, before appealing to the Superior Court, you must request a rehearing with this board to preserve your right to appeal. Rehearing requests must be filed within 30 days of the decision and state all reasons why the decision was illegal or unreasonable. Failure to request a rehearing may forfeit your ability to appeal to Superior Court. And with that, I'd like to have the board introduce themselves, starting with
Derek Horn, staff. Ed Loopy, member.
Gail LeBrecq, member.
Kathy Hooten, member.
Vivian Blondo, alternate member.
Lynn Stewart, alternate.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we have 4 voting members and 2 alternates with us so far this evening. And so we'll manage that as we get to the applications. The first thing on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the August 3rd meeting. Does anyone have any comments, corrections, or motions for the August meeting minutes? I don't have any.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Any comments? All those in favor say aye.
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 How many was that? 4? Okay. Yep. Okay, so we're going to move on to the first item of the public hearing. We have a number of items tonight. We have 6 items. They may go rather quickly, so stick around. We'll see how it works out. So the first one, we're continuing from the August 3rd, 2010 meeting. Brookfield Investment Group, Incorporated, applicant, is seeking a special exception and a variance to allow an excavation of approximately 6 to 8 feet of material, 623,048 square feet of excavation area, from 2 adjacent properties located on Normand Road, which is map 5, lot 61-1, and Wallace Road, map 5, lot 95-1. The applicant is seeking a special exception authorized by section 3.11.I.4 of the zoning ordinance to allow the excavation on lot 61-1, which is located in an agricultural district and permitted by special exception. The applicant is seeking a variance from section 3.11.I.4 of the zoning ordinance because lot 95-1 is located in a residential 1 district where an excavation is not permitted. The property located on Wallace Road, map 5, lot 95-1, is in the residential 1 district and is owned by Brookfield Investment Group, Incorporated. The property located on Normand Road is in the agricultural district and is owned by Normand Road LLC. At the last meeting, we voted 5-0-0 that the application does not have regional impact. And tonight, we will need to act on the written request before a continuance submitted by the applicant. Any updated to that, Derek? Any additional materials?
No, I asked for some clarification from the applicant if they'd be ready to present at the October meeting, and they said they would be ready for the October meeting.
Okay.
I make a motion to grant a continuance until our October meeting.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? There was, just before we make a vote on that, there was also a transmittal from a Matt Monahay, I believe, of a two-page letter signed to the members of the board, and we'll just make sure that we address that if we make a motion to, if we actually make this on the October calendar. Any other discussion?
I just wanted to state that, again, I'm sure it is the feeling of all the members of the board that the continuance will not go ad infinitum. I mean, we'll grant it because they couldn't apparently gather all the information that we'd asked for them, and I appreciate them not coming forward with part of it and waiting till they have all of it, but I do expect them to honor their commitment to have it ready by October.
Okay, I agree with that, and I think we did ask a number of very substantive
Yes.
questions of them, so.
Yes.
Any other discussion? Okay, so we would, vote is to continue to the next meeting, for the October meeting. All those in favor, and let me, before we vote, so Gail is recusing herself from this vote, from the Brookfield?
Yes.
Due to, a butter, I think?
Yes.
A butter. And, I'm going, Len, did you hear this one last
Yeah,
time?
I was here for the last meeting.
Okay, and, I'll have, Len be the fifth voting member for this.
Well,
Yep.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Vivian. Both of them.
Oh, you're right, very good, thank you for counting for me.
I
And
did book
Vivian,
you.
you can vote in on this as well, your first vote. All those in favor to continue to the October meeting, say aye.
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 Opposed, abstain. Okay, 5-0-0. So,
And that'll be October 5th.
October 5th, great. All right, second item on the agenda is also continued from the August 3, 2010 meeting. Roland and Susan Seneville, applicants, are seeking a special exception and variance to develop a non-conforming lot and add a dwelling unit to a lot that currently has a single-family dwelling with attached accessory dwelling unit. The resulting structure will be a two-family dwelling with attached accessory dwelling unit. A special exception to develop the non-conforming lot is authorized by section 14.7.3 of the zoning ordinance. The lot is non-conforming because it currently has 90 feet of frontage, whereas section 4.3 requires 100 feet of frontage. A variance is required because section 5.2 requires that accessory attached dwelling units be attached to a single-family dwellings only, and the proposed development will result in a two-family dwelling with an attached accessory dwelling unit. The property is located at 36 St. Anselm's Drive, which is map 13, lot 10, in the residential 2 district. At the last meeting, we voted 5-0-0 that the application does not have regional impact. We had left the application, the public hearing is still open.
Right.
Is that agreed?
Yeah, I have an issue with this that I want to bring up as far as the process and what actually is being presented with this application. And I have great concern that this is not being properly applied for. And I have spent a considerable amount of time going through the zoning ordinances to substantiate what I'm going to say right now. But the number one issue here with this whole application, as far as I'm concerned, is that the applicant does not live on this particular parcel or in this particular home. And I went back into my 2003 and 2005 zoning ordinances to see exactly what was granted in 2005. And he was granted an accessory dwelling unit to a residential unit. And if you go back to the minutes of that meeting, which I did do, there was no discussion about him not being a resident and not living in that particular property. It is very specific since 2003 that any accessory use that is granted needs to be owner occupied. The primary use, the residential use, needs to be occupied by the owner, and the accessory use was primarily for those areas that are listed, like an in-law apartment or so on and so forth. You cannot have an accessory use to a building without an owner being occupied. So based upon that, when I followed through with the determination which I'm going to come up with, this is what I would consider to be a legitimate duplex. A duplex does not have to be owner occupied. However, anything that has an accessory use has to be owner occupied. So when you look at this and you say, well, he was granted an accessory use in 2005, I would tend to say, based upon the minutes that were in the record, that it was the board's belief that it was owner occupied at that time, because there's nothing that's saying that it wasn't. He has stated to us at the last hearing that we had last month that he does not live in that particular parcel. He lives next door. So my belief is that this property is and should be right now be considered a duplex because it is not owner occupied, and therefore going for a third dwelling unit, it is now should be considered a multifamily. And if you go into the definition of a multifamily, it does state that in part of it that it needs to be at least 800 square feet. So you get into the issue that the accessory use is only 650 square feet. So he would need to have a variance to have that be a multifamily. He should be applying for a multifamily with a variance of the 800 feet requirement because he only has 650 feet in the accessory use dwelling unit. And that's the way I interpret it based upon our zoning ordinances.
Okay. Do you have any questions of Derek? Derek wasn't here at the last meeting on how he, I know the public hearing is still open, so we haven't gone to the
Right.
deliberative session, but any questions of Derek on how he reviewed the application when the applicant came forward?
I have not asked him that, but I'd be more than glad to ask him how he, I know that he and Brian sat down and discussed this, but you cannot have a two-family dwelling with an attached accessory dwelling unit if you are not owner occupied.
Do you, the updated staff review of the application where it says, the application submitted at that time, which was for the 9/06/05 application, indicated the accessory unit would be inhabited by sister-in-law. Although the sister-in-law does not satisfy strict reading of owner occupied, it satisfied ZBA members at that time. No appeal was taken. Applicant's daughter currently resides in accessory unit. So when you reviewed the minutes,
Mhm.
did you not read it that way?
No, I didn't. The minutes have maybe 5 statements. They're very, very, it's very, very simple. He came in 2005, asked for an accessory use to a residential piece of property. There was very little discussion. The vote was made. They voted 5-0-0 to allow the accessory use to the residential property. So there's no mention at all about whether it was owner occupied in the minutes.
Whether he himself was at the property or nearby?
Correct.
Yeah, I didn't look at the complete minutes. I reviewed the staff review, or staff update here.
So I really feel that his application should be for a multifamily dwelling, a special exception for a multifamily dwelling in a residential 2-zone district, which that is part of the table, and that he needs to go for a variance for the square footage of the accessory use building to be accepted as a multifamily unit because it is less than 800 square feet.
Derek, last meeting, we spent a few pages in the minutes talking about, we were kind of surprised
Yep.
that this member, or this person wasn't living at that address, and how do we handle that? And he made reference that, the board and or the town knew of that situation back at that time. When the application came forward this time, did that take into account how this was being presented?
No, it was, when it came in 2005, it wasn't just, I don't remember whether or not it was discussed, but if you do look at the minutes, there's no indication of whether or not it was discussed at that meeting. From the application, it was very clear that he would not be living in the accessory apartment. He lists a different address as the location for the property as well as his home address, and clearly states in here that his sister-in-law would be living in it, and, but, it doesn't appear that there was any discussion of it, and the zoning board granted the special exception based on how it was presented to them at that time. And what I saw this application to be was was an additional dwelling unit, a full dwelling unit, and that you'd be considering that request, not necessarily looking back at the 2005 approval.
So you said the application was clear in the fact that the application was for 36 St. Anselm's Drive, and this person lived at 40 St. Anselm's Drive. Where this application, at least the staff reviewed, doesn't specify that. And it was only, I think, we identified it through his presentation. So, I guess that's how it surprised us this time.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
do we still send the certified letters to the abutters?
Yes,
Then the letter go to him?
yes.
And to him, does it go to the applicant and then to the abutters, or just to the abutters?
Goes to all the abutting property owners as well as the property owner.
Okay, so he probably had 2 letters go to him?
If there are 2 abutters that are under the same exact ownership, we do it as one letter.
Now, under the definition of multifamily in our ordinances, it says a building containing 3 or more dwelling units, or a group of 2 or more buildings containing at least 2 dwelling units. So a multifamily is a building containing 3 or more dwelling units. The accessory use is a dwelling unit, so you do have to, whether it's 650 feet or 850 feet, you have to consider that to be a dwelling unit. So once he goes past having 2 dwelling units, he is now a multifamily, whether he has an accessory use and as a dwelling unit and 2 full dwelling units or not. He has 3 dwelling units. So I think that predicates the issue that this is now becoming a multifamily with a non-residential owner. And I think it could be a very dangerous step we could take here by not recognizing that a building that contains 3 or more dwelling units is specifically a multifamily.
Whether he's occupied it or not, it's still a
It's still a multifamily. And that's true, whether he occupies it or not, that it's still a multifamily, because it is 3 dwelling units.
Right.
My recollection to Mr. Senville's presentation from the last meeting was something to the effect of it was being applied for as an accessory unit rather than a multifamily, something about whether you hit 3 units, it goes commercial. I'm not sure what
I remember that.
what he was referring to with whatever the additional implications of that would be, but that seemed to be his point in trying for an accessory unit rather than going for multifamily, was to avoid being classified
Right. Wasn't
in
there
that, I
something
don't know,
about the
from
sewer?
sewer, from
sewer.
taxation, whatever the other implications were.
Before we proceed, and there could be some votes on this, I'm gonna designate that Len be the alternate that steps up to be voting member on this one, since he heard that beginning part of the application. So we have 5 now for this. Do you have any recommendations, motions, things like, do we want to make a determination whether or not the zoning board in 2005 made a determination that it was satisfactory, that it was the sister-in-law living there?
I don't think we need to bring the 2005 really into it. I think what happened in 2005 happened in 2005. This is a different board. And we go with what's before us now.
Application as is.
Application is in.
And the and I would just follow up with that and say the application is to make a single-family dwelling unit into a three-family dwelling unit, which is, based upon our ordinances, a multifamily. And therefore, I feel he needs a special exception for a multifamily dwelling unit in a residential too, because there are 3 dwelling units, and that if you want to take it that one step further, because the accessory use is only 650 square feet, then he would need a variance because he needs 800 square feet, excuse me. He would need a variance because he only has 650 feet.
Mm-hmm.
So he is expanding, and he is going further down the road of the ordinances.
Okay. Ben?
In listening to Kathy's analysis all the way through, I think her analysis is right on point, and, I mean, he can still get what he wants within the bounds of the zoning, but I think that he has to apply for the right things, as, you know, as Kathy suggested, go for the multifamily with the variance to allow the lower square footage, and, you know, that's perhaps the right way to go at it. I think that I don't think that we should accept what's before us now. I think that, you know, the applicant should be counseled to come back, and if he wants to do it, this is what needs to be done under the zoning law.
I think I want to hear from the applicant in this case, considering, well, one, he's heard our discussion, but two, also the staff review comments regarding the sister-in-law, if they have any input to that, and what their goals are. I think, looking at the application further, I have other questions about this property for this, so I want to make sure we air those
All
as
right,
well.
would I then say to you, are we going to have discussion as to what the applicant should be and, or should not be? Application should be and should not be, and then based upon what we decide on that, we should perhaps take a vote on that, and then keep the public hearing open if it's decided we'll go forward with the application. But I think that we need to decide what the process is before we have any further discussion. And I would not, I would not be adverse to hearing what the applicant has to say in reference to what we have put on the table right now.
Okay. I think I'd like to close, or I'd like to hear that, and I guess we can figure out whether or not we close the public hearing based on what any motions
We can
come up.
close or continue on other aspects if we decide to.
Okay. Mr. Steneville, would you like to come forward? And for any application tonight, it would be for those speaking, come to the front table, have a seat, and you'll be on camera, and everybody in the audience can hear you. Good evening.
Good evening, members of the board. Thank you for having me here again. Well, in regards to some of the statements I've heard, you know, I can kind of see both sides of the equation, okay? Start off with the 3-family going to a commercial, for instance, okay? For a commercial aspect of it, it certainly changes a lot of perspectives that I've got to deal with. I have to deal with, first off, coming right out of it, it's a lot more money to accomplish what I need to accomplish because the requirements change when you go into a commercial property. This is why, one of the reasons why I was pursuing the avenue of going to 2 apartments with an auxiliary apartment. This is why, at one point in time, I spoke with Brian and Derek about it, to pursue that avenue. It seemed reasonable, it seemed like a doable thing. The 650 square feet that I have for an auxiliary apartment, I was actually kind of held to that square footage by the town all along from the beginning. At one point in time, I actually wanted to exceed the 650 square feet. The town said that they didn't want me to exceed the 650 square feet. So it kind of left me stuck in a position where I have a main unit and I have an auxiliary apartment. Otherwise, I would have basically ended up finishing both apartments at the same time and making a larger apartment instead of a 650 square foot. The issue about, and I know we've talked about this one a few times, going back to 2005, and me not residing there in 2005, it was not a secret to anybody at the time that I didn't reside there. I mean, I've had members of the town actually walk the property. I mean, when they walked the property, there was not a stick of furniture in any of the houses at all. So, I mean, my mailing address has always been 40 St. Anselm's Drive. I mean, it's not something that was hid from the board. It was not something that was concealed in any manner. It was very well presented to the board. Sue has got a couple of internal memorandums that she had put out, even from Ed stating the fact that it was owner-occupied property. So the board back then knew exactly what was originally going to transpire. The original application with the board in 2005 was actually to finish 3 units at the time. One of them never got off the ground, and that was the basement. So I basically waited 5 years to get the program back on, and that's why I came back to the board to try and get the permission to finish off the basement. So that's kind of the long and short of the history as to where it started and where it's gotten to. The pitfall for me, and I understand where you're coming out with the RSAs and all of that. I don't dispute them. I'm just saying, from where the town has helped me drive to by keeping me at 650 square feet, to me it seems almost kind of backwards to go back and say, all right, now I want you to get a variance to say, okay, you don't meet the minimum requirement of 800 square feet. It's completely opposite of what the town has asked me to do the first time around.
I could respond to that.
Yeah,
And my response to that would be, is that was a situation where you were dealing with asking for an accessory use, which has a limitation of 650 square feet, and you're only talking about 2 dwelling units. The part of the whole discussion and the application that I'm looking at now has to deal with 3 dwelling units. So everything else now comes under the jurisdiction of a multifamily. And if you had originally gone in as a multifamily in 2005, you would have been able to have made that accessory use building 800 square feet, because that was the square footage that is required for a multifamily dwelling. And if you had a 3rd dwelling unit that was going to be part of your total picture at that time, that is now, you've gone past single-family accessory, you've gone past duplex, you have now gone into multifamily because it's 3 dwelling unit home. And once you are no longer owner-occupied, it does become commercial. It is an investment property, and it's a profit-making, hopefully, I would hope that it is a profit-making adventure for you, but you have crossed that line. The line is single-family, duplex, then multifamily. So that 3rd unit crosses you over into the multifamily avenue from what I read and how I interpret our ordinances.
So it may have been a terms used brought to the table, and so people got stuck around accessory versus the multifamily, because it's 2 different paths you go down, is what you're saying. 2 different paths in how you look at the zoning ordinances and
Correct.
apply.
He was talking only 2 family units before, 2 dwelling units before. Square footage became an issue, and he benefited. And you stated this, and rightfully so, many people in this town do benefit by having accessory use, because, as you said, you know, your cost for your sewer is less, because you are not considered a full dwelling unit, and therefore you do get some breaks into what you would have to pay for your sewer.
So isn't it along the same lines now if you were to take a multifamily, right?
Mhm.
Now, if a multifamily fell into the proper jurisdictions and it had a minimum of 800 square feet, right? Then it would be considered commercial, okay? Because it meets the requirement of the 800 square feet. So now if you take property that say, okay, the 2 of the units are 1,100 square feet, and one is going to be 650 square feet, with the words that you're using that says it's now a 3-family, right? And I'm not going to dispute that, okay? But isn't it still less than commercial, because even though it's a 3-family, but by the words, okay, it's still not making the requirement to actually be a 3-family?
I believe the word dwelling unit is specific in that it is a dwelling unit. how you get to have your 3 dwelling units. You would be allowed, under our ordinances, to have a 3 dwelling unit piece of property with 650 square feet with a variance to the multifamily because it needs 800 square feet. And your accessory cannot, and should not, and now this is a new application, the accessory unit again is an owner-occupied issue.
I'd probably caution us only for the fact of, that's a determination that would have to be made by the board after we
Right.
come to Derek and say, how can I make this a multifamily? What do I have to do? Do I have to expand to 650? What, and you'd have to say variance, special exception, those type of things, so.
No, the question I was trying to
I
get
just
to.
want to caution, it's not a determination of how we rule.
Right.
The question I was trying to get to with that was, okay, so based on being a 3-family, less the 800 square feet, right, on that particular unit. So I understand you'd have to ask for a variance because you don't have the required square footage, right? Now, because it is less, and understand that you're still telling me it's still gonna be a three dwellings, right? But because it's less than the actual square footage, does that make it any less commercial?
No.
So it still stays a commercial unit at that point?
Exactly.
I'm just gonna caution that we don't make all these
Yeah,
determinations
right.
here without the facts in front of us and an application that says that, that's requesting that determination.
But
I-
it doesn't make it less commercial.
I understand.
Oh,
I
okay.
understand what you're saying, yep.
Right.
I'm just saying we haven't voted to that as a board. So, because we're talking about hypotheticals and such, so we don't wanna. Glenn, you have a
I
comment?
just say, I think a unit is a unit if it's gonna be
Right.
occupied by people. Square footage, I don't think enters into the
That's
calculation
in law.
there.
Okay. I have a couple of questions that we didn't get to, just if we're to, this can apply now or later, or however we're gonna do it. So when I looked at the 5 questions that you have to answer and prove for the variance, the first, talking about granting the variance not be contrary to the public interest. We talked about there will be no visible difference. The spirit of the ordinance observed, because the property is zoned residential 2 and is allowed 6 units on the lot, I'm only looking for 2, is what you said. And it's debatable whether it's 2 or 3. The granting the variance would do substantial justice because the process of trying to finish this property has been long in the process. It would benefit me with additional income and family member also reside there. My question on that third one is, what is the opposite? What is the substantial justice if we, or injustice if we deny it? What injustice is there? What kind of, is it a monetary loss, a right to your property? What are you losing if we say no?
Certainly, it's a monetary loss,
Can you quantify that?
$1,000 a month.
And what impact does that have?
It's a substantial impact. I mean, it helps pay my mortgage. Obviously, I own both properties at 36 and 40, so I'm paying a mortgage on the house. Right now, not that it's a concern to the board, but my daughter lives in the house, in the auxiliary apartment, so the rent there is very minimal. So I have the income from the main house, which pays the mortgage. So right now, if you drive by the house, you'll see that I upkeep the property. I make it as presentable to the public as possible. I like to maintain that decorum to make it look like it's presentable to the public. The financial income coming from this would allow me to keep my property maintained where it should be maintained. It is an economic impact, for sure.
Okay? And that turns into the fourth item, the values of surrounding properties will not be diminished because the property is well maintained. I have a question on that. So when I drove by the property, and we talked about that you could park up to 6 cars in front, I thought the spot was pretty small, and it's right on top of the road. Has there been an occasion where there's 6 cars there?
Yes,
Is
there
it
is.
routine?
No, it's not routine. Normally, there's 5 cars there. So
5
the
cars.
auxiliary apartment's my daughter's, so there's only 1 car there usually. So there's usually 4 cars on the other lots.
And it would be, you'd be able to establish a system where that each unit maintains one row essentially, and
And
they can
that's
have two
the,
cars?
that's the way it is right now, okay? So right now, the people that live in the main part of the house are well aware of the fact that if I ever got to converting the basement, that they'd have to relinquish those spots in the middle. So each area would have a designated line, so to speak.
Okay.
Would the property owner or would the tenants each have to move if there'd be parking, like, one in front of the
Yes.
other? So if
Yep.
number one wanted to get out, number two and three had to move?
No, it's one in front of each other, so if the husband and wife say she parks first and she needs to move, then the husband would have to move the truck
And what
back.
about the other unit?
No, it won't impact them.
Because you can park 3 across,
Yes,
2 deep.
yes, right.
First of all, by making a suggestion that he comes in under the multifamily requirement, I am not saying for, that it would be perhaps an undue financial hardship on him, because he still would be able to rent them. And I am not saying that if he came in under a special exception for multifamily, that it would predicate a negative vote on my behalf. I just am concerned about the actual application being correct and its being there. The other thing that's important about it is that you see under the staff review, it states on the number 1 part is, this application was not forwarded to the planning board for review or comment because it does not involve a commercial or industrial use or a multifamily use that would require a site plan approval. Though that issue of parking, which you're just discussing, is a site plan approval process. And I think that because you are going to have 3 rentable dwelling units in this particular home, that it would need to go in front of your planning board for a site plan approval for issues such as the parking.
Yeah. And
And I think it covers it all.
And I don't mean to delve a lot into the property, like parking and things like
Right.
that. What I'm trying to get to is my next question is, why this piece of property? What makes, for the 5th question in the variance application is, why is your property unique in that you deserve a variance to the zoning ordinance that's equally applied to you and your neighbors? Why is this property unique?
Well, it's not really unique in the respect that if you look at the other properties in the neighborhood, I mean, the property to the right of me is a 2-family. You look across the street, or not across the street, in the other direction, it's a duplex. You drive around to the back, there are 3 families in the back. I guess I'm not special in any respect, other than the fact that I have the square footage in the property to do it. I have 200 feet of land that goes all the way back to the neighbor's property in the back, so I have plenty of yard in order to accommodate the number of people that are gonna live in these places. I live next door to the property. I maintain both properties. The property is not being looked at or being done with the intent of being done as an investment property. It is, but it's not an investment property to be turned around and sold within a month. It's something that we've intended to pass down and through the family. My wife's kind of looked at it as, it's a single-level ranch, so when she gets older and if I'm not around, she wants to move back into her house because this was the house that she grew up in. So, I think it's a perfect property for us, and like I said, basically it was to bring a little more finance into the kitty, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, and I especially wanted to ask that 5th question because you had not provided a response to it that I was able to find in the application, so. And that, it's similar as in the special exception, question 4, an answer was not provided, but, and that one spoke to the proposed locations of sufficient size to allow for adequate and appropriate facilities for the proper operation of the use. So when I looked at the property, I thought the property was tight to consider to have 2 dwelling units plus an accessory, or 3 dwelling units, however it's categorized. I thought it was tight. You know, you look at the parking, and the picture that we have is with snow there, right onto a road, how busy it is at St. Anselm's Drive. I'm not sold, I guess, on this application. So, did anybody else have any questions or motions or comments? or, well, let me say,
motions
any,
at this
well, let me, any questions for Mr. Centerville? Okay, I'm gonna open it up to the public as well, see if there's any comments and concerns before we move forward on this. Anyone else here speaking on behalf of the applicant? Any abutter speaking against the applicant? Any interested parties? Anyone want to speak to this application? Okay. Comments, thoughts, what do we wanna do? Lynn?
I think we need, as Gail, or, as Kathy suggested, to settle the procedural aspect of it first before, being able to talk about the merits of it. Whether this is the right application or, how we should go forward procedurally from here.
Okay. And we just need to remember that it was noticed and we are proceeding that it's a variance and a special exception required, is how it was noticed and requested.
I wouldn't mind looking at what we've done in the past, is if, when we have situations like this and there are different opinions and comments by the board members, is that we have in the past, I think, denied without prejudice.
I was just thinking the same thing.
Wow, it's an echo. And allowing Mr. Centerville to come back in, and I say that because I strongly feel that he needs to come back in as a multifamily dwelling. If he wants to increase it to 3 dwelling units, and I will continue to state that because that's the way I interpret the ordinance and what I have read. I don't want to deny it on any other reason other than the fact that I think that it is not applied for in accordance with the zoning ordinances, and I would be in favor of denying without prejudice on his behalf.
So part of your motion would state that it would require, that essentially he can't ask for it as he did. The zoning ordinance doesn't work that way, that to make it work, he would have to come in, that we believe he would have to come in with a multifamily
Application,
application.
correct. I would make a motion that
Making that motion?
yeah.
Have we closed the public
No.
hearing?
No,
No, okay, I'm not making any motion.
well, I was just,
I'm not deliberating yet either.
because we could, you could make a motion or a finding, before we close it. But any advice, Derek, before we go wild with the board here?
I have,
Go ahead.
I think that Mr. Centerville should be made aware that as a multifamily, there are town services he will not receive. Right now, he's receiving the public works services and all. As a multifamily, you don't get those services.
So no curbside pickup of trash, recycling?
Recycling, I believe
I think you
do,
can as
yeah.
recycling, you're right.
So, he's gotta take that into consideration too. He's gonna have to make provisions too.
So when we say we deny without prejudice, well, we are prejudicing the fact that we don't like how he came in with. That's the only prejudice we have, is that you can't come to us with a 2 dwelling units plus an accessory.
And I do, and again, I went to accessory dwelling unit, it says one accessory dwelling unit may be attached to a single-family residence, subject to the following provisions. And then then it says, the single-family resident or the accessory dwelling unit shall be and shall remain owner-occupied. And they mention that it has to be attached to a single-family residence. This is an accessory unit that they're attaching to a 2-family dwelling, a duplex, not a single family. And the more I read into it, the more I feel very comfortable in making the statement that I do feel he should come in as a multifamily.
If we make this motion, or if there's a motion, you made the motion already,
I
correct?
can't,
Oh, right,
we
right,
ever
right.
still have
No
a-
motion.
So if we
Motion,
close,
yeah.
I'm gonna close the public hearing, so now we can go wild with motions. Obviously, Mr. Centerville has the right to come back and appeal. He made mention of emails, letters that made statements that how the townspeople, you know, he can speak through those things and get facts on his side on what the town did at the time. Whether it's applicable or not, he could speak to those things, because we don't have all those facts. So, I'm done talking.
The one thing I just wanna emphasize is that even though if we take this step and deny without prejudice and suggest he come back for a multifamily application and also requesting a variance at the same time, that it also doesn't mean that we would be, it's not a guarantee that we're going to approve it.
Correct,
Okay.
correct. It's as much not a guarantee as it is as much, it's not a negative.
Right, because denial without prejudice
Right.
doesn't mean, it means that we have not addressed the criteria, the variance criteria, or the special exception criteria, which of themselves he has to meet.
Correct.
Okay.
So my motion would be to deny this application without prejudice. Because the application should have been for a multifamily dwelling unit or, in the residential 2 district.
Okay.
As it is a 3 dwelling unit. He's looking for 3 dwelling units.
All right. We have a motion on the floor. Is there any?
Second that.
A second. Any discussion?
This multifamily unit that we're requesting him, if he wants to do that, would make his lot more non-conforming, correct?
I'm not sure.
I believe is R2 allows
It does.
multifamily up to 6 units, so as long as he gets the proper variances, it is within the bounds of the current zoning law.
He's allowed multifamily in R2 under a special, if he's granted a special exception.
Yes.
That's right.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And I would think that it might also satisfy him to apply for the, just to dot your i's and cross your t's, to apply for the variance because of the 650 square foot issue versus the 800 square foot issue.
Okay, so that's part, yeah, okay.
It'd be 2 variances.
No, one special
Yeah,
exception,
you're right,
one
one
variance.
special exception, 1 variance.
And I could add that onto the motion also, that
I think she's got it.
it would also, and that it would, and that he would need to have a variance. Okay,
Any discussion?
Require him to go to planning board also?
yes. If he, because it would be a multifamily application, and then they do the site plan review for the parking.
And where does he go first, the planning or the,
Typically, you would come to us first.
okay?
Doesn't always happen that way.
Little rusty.
No, it happens all the time. People come to us last.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
We got no respect around here. No, so, any other further discussion? We have a first and a second to deny without prejudice.
Correct.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained. Mr. Seneville, you understand what we just did? We denied without prejudice. You need to talk to Derek and see how we proceed from there. All right? Thank you for your patience. All right.
You're right.
I read it very, very carefully.
Okay. Now we have some new applications. Number 3 on the agenda is Christopher P. Tyler, applicant, is seeking a variance to allow the placement of a shed that will be set back 2 feet from the side property line and 3 feet from the rear property line, whereas Section 5.1 of the Goffstown zoning ordinance requires a 10-foot setback from side and rear property lines. The property is located at 16 Upton Lane, which is map 36, lot 62, in a residential 1 district. Prior to the public hearing tonight, the ZBA needs to vote on regional impact. Any comments on regional impact or motions?
I make a motion it doesn't have a regional impact.
I'll second it.
Okay, and I am gonna designate for this application that Vivian be the voting, no, is that hard?
No, that's fine.
Is that okay? All right, so vote on this. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained. All right,
I do want to disclose that I know the applicant, not enough to recuse myself from the application, but his wife and I both travel in the same circles in our childcare field.
okay. Everybody understand that? All right, if you have any issues, please bring them up. All right, thank you for that. So we voted. Just make a note on staff review that this application was not forwarded to the planning board for review or comment, and the application was also not forwarded to the Conservation Commission, based on the criteria. So, is Mr. Tyler here? Mr. Tyler, please come forward. If I hopefully pronounced your name right.
Yes, you did.
All right, what do you have?
I apologize, 2:30 is catching up with me right now. So if
Okay.
I feel that you're seeing me a little lackadaisical, because I keep taking care of my 8-month-old right now. She's a bundle of energy, as I was explaining to Linda, and it's hard to kind of
Yeah,
tie that down a little bit.
good, good. So what do you have for us? What do you want to do?
All we wish to do is, it's basically, the shed that was there when we bought the house was a Sears galvanized steel shed that was put in when we were there, when we bought the house. And the unit, I'm not exactly what month it was, whatever the month that we had those high winds that knocked out power a while ago, a branch came down and took out a corner of the roof of the shed and just kind of like destroyed it. And it says no welder or anybody fabricated is gonna wanna fix that. So it basically destroyed part of the roof and ripped the side of it off. So just replacing the shed, that's all I wanted to do, is replace it.
So there was one there before and you're replacing it?
Yes.
Pretty much the same footprint?
It's about 1.5 feet wider and about 1 foot longer. That's about it.
Is it closer to the property lines now, or but the same distances to the property?
The neighbor had replaced the fence with a new fence, and the new fence in the same place that it was at has the same distance. The only difference is that the fence of the property where we were located at, that fence was just like a chicken wire fence. So that was the 2-foot distance between my side, and then her side was another 2-foot. So it's actually still the same 4-foot back end between the property where the new fence is and the back of the shed. So the 2-foot was put in there because Derek had told me to put that in there. I was just going by what he recommended.
The 2 feet is off the fence, but not the property line. You're 4 feet off the property line, but 2 feet off the fence.
Right, correct.
On all sides,
The back side,
back side.
yeah. The stone wall is 3-foot side.
Okay, so that's different than what we have in the application, as you're telling me, is that the distances to property line is different? Derek, do you have?
When,
Oh, I
you know,
don't
when we went over the plot plan that was provided, I was not positive on what the side setback was, cause it shows 2 feet to one fence, and then you have the thick line, or I guess the property line is somewhere in between those 2 fences. So, conservatively, I said, at most, it's only 2 feet.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
But it may be as much as 4 feet.
Okay,
property
all right.
line.
So if we approve it as written, he's actually farther than what he's gotten approval for. He could,
It's actually between 3 and 4 feet off the line, not 2.
we just didn't realize that. Okay. Any other comments or questions? I know we've already asked you a couple questions.
No.
Okay.
You bought the house when?
Looking on
05 of June, I believe. My memory, not too good right this minute,
And
sorry.
do you know when the shed was, how old the shed was when you bought the house?
It was already there. It was categorized as being a building set when we bought it. So I don't know if the Schaefers bought it before us, who lived there, or the previous residents. I can't recall the name.
Sterling.
Sterling? Yeah, I don't know if they bought it. But I was not made aware of that building had tied with the property any variance or permit within buying the house. Nobody notified me of that. If I had, it would have been different.
Well,
Yep.
I was there at the property yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
and we drove around, and I figured that was, your request was to replace that shed, because I saw it and I said, wow, it's a danger, because the way it's, you had that curve in it, the roof curve, it was like a dent, and I'm like, something, and you have a lot of toys outside, and I figured that's where you store them in the wintertime?
Well, the idea is to put most of the rest of the toys in the yard in there,
Yeah.
away from the winter, yeah. As long as, there's
It's
room
a-
to fit it in.
Your shed is very tall.
Yeah, I couldn't get the same requirements for a standard shed from any one of the manufacturers that I talked to, whether it be PWI shed or even anything from Home Depot or Lowe's. They wouldn't go past a certain amount.
So the height is lower?
The height is much lower, it's like well over 3 feet lower, so you're talking about a snow load at the same amount
Right.
that would have the same amount of weight structure that would not support anything on the inside. And with a peak that's raised like that, I can take more off the property and put it up inside, under the peak and out of the way,
Very, very tall shed.
yeah.
The new shed would have a larger footprint, or no?
Not too much larger. It's, the old one was like 88 square feet, this is like 110 or 108.
So it is larger,
So it's
Slightly
gonna be
larger, yeah,
slightly larger.
yeah.
Adjective, somewhat.
But dimensionally, are we talking about like 8x10 versus 6x8?
Sounds
In
like
terms of what the actual
We're going from
footprint
8 by
that
10
you're
to a
building.
10 by 12 or something?
The old one was, an 8 by 10,
By 10.
8.5 by 10, and the new one is 10 1/4 by 11.5 or something like that, some odd number. I couldn't get it to be exact because of the issue of the flooring, I couldn't get even. I just had to go with what I had.
How big is your parcel of property?
Do you have that, Eric? I don't have
And
it.
according to the assessment, the bottom of the first page is 11,730 square feet.
Quarter of an acre. And the reason why you felt that you couldn't bring that shed over another 7 feet was, from the property line, was because,
Leach field, Lisa?
Leach field.
was it the leach field?
Yeah, the ending of the leach field is about 3.5 feet further to that, and if you put it out 7 feet, it's already 4 feet over the leach field.
Okay.
Other questions? So I went through, you answered all the variance criteria, talking about public interest, spirit of the ordinance, substantial justice, valuation of properties, and there you actually, I noticed when I did the drive-by that the yards in your neighborhood, the rear areas are pretty compact, because
Yeah.
you're abutting tree line
Yeah,
and hill
very,
and.
yeah.
And actually, talking about surrounding property values, your neighbors to the left, the Gilmans,
Yes,
they have a shed in the exact same location on their property.
Yeah,
On their side of the house too. So it's definitely not unique to be situated like that in your neighborhood. And then the last criteria, the hardship criteria, you talked about the leach fields, that your property was unique and that there's a leach fields in the way that you really couldn't move it any other location. I have no other questions. Anybody? No. Okay, thank you. Anyone here to speak on behalf of the applicant? Any abutters speaking for or against? Sir, if you can come forward and state your name.
My name is Rodney Stark. I'm here on behalf of an abutter.
Okay, can you tell us which property that
Yes,
person
the
is?
Gilman property.
The Gilman property, okay, right.
I don't know if all voting members have seen the property in question. I have some photographs. Which I brought. Which show this is my client's driveway. photographs looking down. This is my client's fence line right here.
Are they pictures of the shed or the position of the shed?
Yes, the shed is shown in all these photographs.
And to you, is this a shed that's under construction, the new one or the old one?
This, and this last one is a photograph of the shed. This shed is a shed that's under construction. It was, no building permit was applied for. And my client, came to her home. She's a resident of Nevada. She came to her home last October, and observed that a ladder, a construction ladder, was leaning on the roof of this building, or on the side of the building, and its feet, the feet of this ladder that was being used, were on her property. She has great concerns about personal liability because of the extreme closeness of this property to her property line. Also, as alternate Blondo pointed out, it has a very tall, it's a very tall structure. It's much unlike the structure that it purports to replace, which was as I understand it, and I believe there may be other residents of the neighborhood present who could speak to this better than I, but it's my understanding that the structure that it's replacing was a much lower structure, metal, as Mr. Tile said, corrugated metal, and basically I don't know if you could say it was half the height. This is an imposing structure. If you're near it, it really is. I wrote to Mr. Tyler in July, I think, about my client's concern, particularly with respect to the fact that he was building this building with his ladders being placed on my client's property, and I never got a response from him, so I take that as it's a tacit admission, at least it's not an open admission, but nevertheless, he didn't challenge the statement. As the chairman pointed out, in discussing the previous application, particularly with regard to the question of unnecessary hardship, I want to address one other thing before that, and that is, in his application, Mr. Tyler speaks of this being grandfathered, a grandfathered use. Other than with respect to grandfathered lots, that is, lots which were in existence at the time the zoning code was enacted, I'm not familiar with the concept of grandfathered uses being permitted. In other words, if you have a structure which is on your property but does not coincide with the zoning ordinance, I don't know that you have created in your own right a right which is the equivalent of a grandfathered right, as that term is known. In other words, and listening to Mr. Tyler tonight, and in response to questions, it's quite clear that this structure is not, in fact, a replacement of what was there. It's a much larger structure, both on the footprint, as well as the height, as I've addressed. It presents, being a wooden structure in an area of property which is overhung by trees, it presents special fire dangers. Mr. Tyler, in his application, makes a statement that it's 100 feet to the closest neighbor's house, which would be my client's home. And I paced it last night, it's 70. To the rear corner of the Gilman residence. The question of unnecessary hardship is addressed in his application. However, the Supreme Court in the Margate Motel case, which is I think, particularly important case in the area of variances, makes it clear that, as does the application, that there's got to be something unique about this property that does not apply to any other property in the neighborhood, that let's say compels the location of this shed in this location. And when we are considering this shed, that's what we're considering. We're not considering the shed this replaced. Or the fact that it's replacing a previously existing shed. I can't address the question that the chairman brought up in terms of the shed on the Gilman property. I can't, in other words, I can't say dimensionally how that fits on the Gilman lot. But I would say that it's not an issue. It's certainly not an issue here tonight. The Tyler property doesn't show on the right-hand side, does not show that side of the property. And it does have, there is some land on that side. In other words, I'm not sure that this is the only location on the Tyler lot where this shed can be located. It seems to be saying that his septic field encompasses the entire rear of his property, and that would be surprising, because that would be an extraordinarily large leach field. There's no reason, for example, why the shed couldn't be located closer to the house, or the rear of the garage, for example. So I'm not sure that the reasons that he has given in question number 5 are really adequate to address what the purpose of the rule is. I mean, there must be a reason for this rule, for setbacks. And certainly, there may be some circumstances in which an accessory use such as this, even though it's permitted use in this district, simply doesn't fit. That doesn't prevent the owner of the property from using the property as a residential property. And that doesn't, if he can't have a shed in the backside of his property, I don't know that renders the application of that code provision unreasonable and unnecessary. One of the other provisions, one of the other questions is substantial justice. And I guess the question is, from whose point of view is the board looking at that question? Is it looking at the substantial justice question from the applicant's point of view, or from the point of view of the public as a whole, or from the point of view of an abutter? I can certainly agree that from the applicant's point of view, the granting of the application would be substantial justice. I don't know that it's providing substantial justice to my client. I would dispute that it is. And I think that pretty much covers what I had for comments.
Okay. So, I was following along in the criteria, because there's 5 questions, and you addressed them. Public interest, spirit of the ordinance, substantial justice, and we look at it from all points of view. From the applicant, the abutters, and the public. Values of surrounding properties and owing to special conditions of the property. So, now we're gonna turn it back over to Mr. Tyler in a couple minutes, but, so your specific, or your client's specific, disagreements are what?
Well, as I say, it was first brought to her attention when she came here last October, and the building was then under construction, and she found this gentleman's ladder on
Okay.
her land.
So is the shed too big, not a right, too close?
Liability.
Is that a zoning board's decision to make a decision on liability?
Well, I think when you look at the question of why do we have setback requirements? And what is the spirit of the ordinance? What does it mean to have a setback?
Mhm.
Why are structures set back from side and rear yards, lines? And one of them, I dearly suspect, was to prevent liability to an abutting property owner.
What's the risk in this application that endures liability?
Well, for example, if this gentleman is placing ladders on the property and on my client's property and would have a fall, for example, while he's working on this structure, either now or repairing it sometime in the future, and would fall for some reason and land on her property, maybe her land isn't perfectly level and doesn't provide a solid base for his ladder.
Okay.
I don't know. The possibilities for liability are endless. But that's a very major concern that she has, and
Do you think the applicant has a reasonable ability to put a shed on his property? Is that a reasonable request to try to do?
on his shed,
On his
on his property.
Right. I'm not saying
As a-
where.
As a general, yes, absolutely, as a general proposition, it's an allowed use in this district.
And is it a shed, is it a building that requires permit? Do you know any of those rules? I don't. So,
Well,
you say that he's violating anything?
I've seen,
You made reference to it at the beginning.
I did, and what I've seen is, a letter that, that Derek wrote to a notice of violation in which he stated, among other things, that he was building this shed without a building permit.
Okay.
That implied to me that a building permit may very well have been required. I haven't looked into it independently, but I take it that it may have been required.
Okay.
And that may be why Mr. Horn made that reference.
Do you believe that if this shed was put into the location that the applicant is requesting, that the value of your client's property is diminished? That's one of the 5 criteria we answer.
Yes. I would say it could be. I'm not a real estate appraiser. I don't have that necessary expertise, but I would say that again, I fall back on the concerns that my client has about liability, for example, and say to myself, would it be reasonable for a prospective buyer to be shown the property lines and have the same question, for example, not knowing what kind of experience that prospective buyer may have. But it wouldn't be unreasonable. From my angle, the code has these setback requirements, and it probably I think a proper budding property owner is entitled to certain expectations with respect to the application of those setback requirements. And I would find it hard to believe that I would find it hard to believe that my client's property is worth more with that shed being 2 or 3 feet from her boundary than it is if it were 10 feet away. In other words, I think it has a detrimental effect simply because of its very close proximity.
Okay. Yeah, we do look at the spirit of the ordinance, as you say, and the property boundaries and setbacks is what their applicant is seeking a variance from. And so we do look at why why setbacks are important. And you made your case, in this case, it's a liability issue. Anyone have any other questions for Mr. Stark? Come in.
Mr. Tyler indicated the shed existed on site before he purchased the property. Were there any previous issues that your client had with the shed in that location, or is the objection here that we're going beyond a direct one-for-one replacement and expanding the usage in that area?
The particular objection that my client has is that the use seems to be expanded considerably. And this is a stick-built shed. Obviously the footprint's larger. So I would say that in large measure, the concerns I'm expressing tonight have to do with what's happening now out there with this current structure, which is apparently unpermitted, but I can't say that for sure. And I can't address, as I've said, I can't address the previous structure. I'm relying in terms of size upon what the applicant himself has said.
But as as I gather expansion is one of the principal points of objection then.
Expansion and certainly height,
Right.
footprint and height.
Do you-
It's a major structure. I mean, if you compare the roof line,
With his house.
if you compare the roof line of that structure, for example, to the roof line of, that's another set you can have. It's not that dissimilar. Matter of fact, I have another set which I could,
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Stark?
I just have a comment. If he hasn't got a building permit, then his first step would be to get a building permit.
But we can't issue a building permit that is in violation of the zoning ordinance, so Mr. Tyler has been directed to
Get the variance first.
or place a shed in a location that meets the requirements, and he elected to apply for the variances for setback.
And then he
relief.
goes for his building permit.
Yes.
Any other questions for Mr. Stark? Okay, well, you may get another chance.
thank you.
Can
Mr. Tyler? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would
Karen?
like to ask, could I, before we go in,
Okay.
ask Mr. Tyler a question?
There's other people that wanna speak to it.
Okay,
People in the audience.
that's a good point. Okay, so other people, any other abutters speaking out against this application?
How come I can't
Against?
ask Mr. Tyler a question now?
He can respond to all the questions and concerns. She's
You asked.
I might be able to speak. I'm Sandy Sherman, and I live directly across the street.
Can
and
you
I've lived-
identify the
I've
property?
lived 30 Glenwood Drive, and I've lived there for over 30 years.
Okay,
So I can speak a little bit about, honestly, the other shed was not intrusive at all. It was this small little garden variety thing. I don't even know if I guess the lawnmower could have gone in it, but it was one of those small little storage sheds. This, to my way of thinking, is an outbuilding. It's really, it's not only the footprint is, I think, considerably larger than what I remember, because I really hardly ever noticed the other shed being out there. But this is like somebody put a little apartment out there or something. It's big. It's bigger in the footprint, and it's obtrusive because it's so tall. And in regard to the leach field, you can ask Mr. Tall, I'm not 100% sure, but the leach field that he had redone was done after the shed was there. So if it's too close now, maybe that was put there, you know what I mean? He
After which
created
shed?
that problem.
after which shed was done, the one that's under construction right now?
Yeah, it's been under construction forever. It's been there for a long time, in that condition, without any siding or whatever going on, so,
Any other comments?
Year, 2 years,
I don't know, quite some time.
after the big storm when the tree fell on the other one, probably.
I don't remember that happening, but it could well have. But
Yeah.
I'm just saying that if you can see, it certainly, it's an eyesore to me when I look out my windows and I see this thing there.
So, and the question was, you said, did he put in a leach field before he built this?
No, there was a leach field, but he had work done on his leach field. He had it
was time to do it,
reworked,
yeah.
you know, so I don't know if it ended up being closer to the building now, after the building, you know, if he
We'll ask him
created
that
that,
question.
you know, so I don't know. Anyway, are there any questions from me?
Lynn?
Just one, looking at the aerial photo in our packet here, this says it's dated from 2006. Is that building in the back corner of the property there, the old shed that you're
Okay.
referring to?
But that's hard.
I don't have my reading glasses,
Yeah,
but
But that little,
this thing here,
that little thing
it
in the
could
top-
be, it
top
could be,
corner of the
I
photo.
don't know, but what I'm telling you is, as it, you think?
I don't know, they're hers, so she-
How many
Lynn,
power
it
are
looks
they?
to me like that's the old one,
Don't
because
worry,
if
I'm
you look,
fine.
if you compare the roof lines, they're
Yeah.
90
Yeah.
degrees apart, so.
Yeah, I think it most probably is, I don't know. But honestly, when it was there before, it wasn't noticeable, and it wasn't an eyesore, really, because it was kind of way behind the house. Now it's, just sticks right out there, and we have a problem in that neighborhood, in that people have moved in down at the other end, and their house, their yard, everything is a mess. So my husband has MS, and we may have to sell our house because I don't know if I can make it handicap accessible for him. Anyway, but the point is, when I put it on the market, I have to have a way for people, real estate people, to get into the neighborhood, and it doesn't look trashy, because it really takes the value away from my property if I'm trying to sell
Do you
it.
think part of your concern could be resolved if the shed was just finished instead of being half finished?
That, I don't know, that might help it. It would really help it if it could be out of eyesight to the neighborhood.
All right, any other questions? All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else, any other abutters speaking against the application? Please come forward and have a seat and state your name.
Hi, my name is Valerie Callahan, and I own the property at 29 Glenwood Drive, which I'm directly across, kind of adjacent to Mr. Tyler's property. I purchased my home in October of '05, and I agree with Sandy in the sense of the previous shed was it fit right into the neighborhood. You couldn't really see it. It really fit the property and the neighborhood as a whole. The other one, the one that is under construction right now, is absolutely totally inappropriate for the neighborhood. You drive by, that's all you see. And I agree in the sense of with what Sandy said, if there comes a time to where, houses need to be put on the market, to us, that's a big deal. Because you drive by, you see, to me, a small house in the backyard. And it's not the same shed, and there's reasons we have ordinances, and there's reasons we have zoning laws to follow them. And there's certain guidelines that we have to go through in order to get what we want. We can't just go ahead and do it. And I don't agree with the fact that the proper procedures weren't followed here.
Would you have the same objection to the size of the shed and the color and any other objections you have if he met the setbacks and that he was 10 feet from the side and back setback?
I think the shed that is in construction right now is totally different to the one that was there before. Again, the one that was there before was a nice little, I'm gonna say Home Depot kind of, cracker box shed that you can put a few. This one to me is like a small house.
So you saying that you would probably still object?
Yes.
If it was 10 feet from the side?
Yes.
Do you know if the sheds like that existed on the property prior to this one being built are even sold anymore?
And have I looked at the research of it? No. But I'm sure if you go to a Home Depot or Lowe's or any home improvement store, they have plenty of them there.
Okay. All right. Any questions? All right, thank you for coming and speaking. Any other abutters speaking against? Any interested parties that haven't yet want to speak to this? Mr. Tyler, we're going to come back around to you.
I have a question.
Do you have any responses to the questions you've heard, or Kathy has additional questions?
Hey, I'd like to know, it's very difficult for me to get a grasp as to what this shed is. Do you know exactly how tall the shed is?
The flat point is a standard sidewall, 6 foot. It's a standard kit form that you can buy from Northern Tool. They give you the kit and plans, and you can put it together yourself.
Okay, how tall from ground floor to the
To the peak,
to the peak? How tall
another
is it?
2.5 feet, so 8.5 feet high.
So we're talking 8.5 feet. That's what you
Yep.
say it is.
Mhm.
Okay. It's a bit difficult for me to try and figure out whether or not this shed could possibly be built within the setback requirements, because the surveying or the plan that you submitted with your application, 10 tends to lack a little bit of professionalism and exactness as to what your property looks like. It's hard for me to make a decision or even contemplate whether or not it could go on the back of the garage, whether or not it is too close to the septic system. And in all fairness, those are issues that I do as a board member should have to look at. And I should have something on here that would, I would say professionally would designate where those are. So there is a determination whether or not you don't have the ability to put that shed in another place on your property. The reason that I asked you about the height of it is because it does say under accessory buildings and facilities that it should be no height, should be any higher than 17 feet to the peak. And you saying 8.5,
Yeah,
9
it
feet,
just looks
you are
tall
within
from the outside only because the walls continue all the way up.
And it does. Do you know how many how much square feet that you have in that?
It's less than 110. It's not very much.
Do you have, is it all open inside, this shed that you're talking about, or is there any loft or anything that's in there?
No, it's all open.
It's all open?
Yeah.
Okay. So that,
You
this
can hang
probably
whatever
would
you
be-
want in it.
Mhm. But I find it, I believe that Attorney Stark had referenced about possibly putting it behind the garage, and I had thought that when I looked at the, this aerial view, that was a possibility, and yet I actually like to see more information regarding your property as to where things are located and exactly what is there, as to whether or not this shed could possibly be in conformance with our ordinances.
Would a verbal response be sufficient as a first response? At least he could describe it.
Floor plan
maybe?
at least, with some dimensions on it, because we.
I think describing the yard is what you're trying to do, is describe the
My
yard.
question is, does he have the approval for a septic, a leach field?
Oh, yeah, it's been
So
done.
you have the dimensions of where that leach field is.
Oh, yeah, yep, sure do.
So if we saw that, we would know how close the shed is to this leach field.
Goes right under the brick walk. It's in the backyard. Basically, only a few feet from the shed. That's what we need for the property size for that particular dimension for the leach field.
And you're right about the shed, it's wood all the way up. You haven't got a break there where it can be a little bit more appealing to the neighborhood.
What is your lot, your side lot width on the other side of your house to your neighbor's property?
Do you have that, Derek?
I do
don't
not,
have it with me.
no.
No.
And that's why if I had something that was more,
If I may, Kevin, another question
Lynn?
on the construction also. Is this placed on a foundation? Was a slab poured for this, or is it placed on
No
some sort
slab.
of a?
It was just put on whatever was there before, which was on just cinder blocks.
Okay, so there is no permanent foundation
No, it's not
poured for
permanent.
it.
Nope.
Any other comments to the questions or concerns that you heard from any of the abutters?
It can be moved anywhere on the property. The only issue is if it moves to the other side of the property, then the 27-inch thick pine tree would have to come down to make room for that, so it doesn't overtake the gentleman's property next door. In other words, his property line is not really that too far from mine. The same thing with the person on the left, the Gilman property. The only difference is they have a fence and the other gentleman does not have a fence.
So your contention is that there is no other reasonable or usable space on your property in the rear yard to put this structure?
Right, because of the square footage of the land is so small that from, if you're looking in the backyard, 3/4 of the whole backyard is the septic layout. Is the design from the field, from the company that designed it. And that the permit was pulled, and I believe Mark signed for it.
Do you know if this leach field diagram is larger than the previous diagram, or was moved or anything? Are you able to speak to that? As Vivian, you're saying that they would have a plot where it was put in?
Right.
Into the property?
Yep.
Do you have that plot? And do you know if that, the previous plot of the previous septic system, are they the same?
I don't have a previous one, but I just have the
Okay.
current one from when
Okay.
they came and did it.
Is your leach field for more bedrooms than your previous one, or is it for the same amount?
Oh, it's the same amount, yeah. Right. If we did more bedrooms, there'd be a problem with the backyard accepting that.
Okay.
And so we didn't go for that, so.
Did you change the location of the leach field?
No, it's still the same place.
Is it the same size as before?
That's what I was trying to ask.
Yeah,
was it-
I thought.
It's the same size with the extension of the exhaust pipe on the end that goes to the end, that they're all required now. Yeah, the vent pipe.
I actually saw the vent pipe in the pictures. I think it's back towards.
I'm
the-
trying to
the
kind of
elevation.
cover it, because my wife hates it.
They got the phony boulders you can put on.
Yeah, right.
All right, any last questions?
Only thing I would like to see some dimensions on the shed, because based on what I'm looking at here, it's a little bigger than what it's being made out to be.
Do you mind if I see those shots?
Sure. They're all the same, right? Sets.
It's all the same.
Any other questions? Vivian, Ren?
When's this gonna be finished?
He's on hold right now.
I know, but.
Has it
when
been
does-
under construction for a while?
It has been, the funds have been in and out,
Okay.
and basically the only thing left on the shed is the siding and the door.
Is it a kit, or is it?
Yeah, the frame of it was a kit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is the picture that's on the application that indicates that it was, creation date of November 26, 2006, that was likely the previous shed?
That was the
2006.
previous one, yeah.
That's the question that I think Vivian or Led asked, the
Yeah.
abutter. Any,
Well, I honestly would like to see something more
all right, Mr. Roth, thank you.
than this.
Okay.
Well, you have a motion?
I make a motion to continue it until the October meeting.
I'll second that.
What are you asking for?
I'm asking for,
What's the standard, Derek, on what should be a drawing that's coming in? I mean, is there a key phrase that it's been surveyed, that it's been, professional?
No, I think normally we tell people to submit a scaled drawing of the lot with a scale, and, you know, something that's understandable.
Then this-
Scaled and detailed perhaps,
Detail of the
showing,
entire lot of all
showing
property lines?
showing locations of the various features, including the shed, the leach field, a more exact description of the property lines than what are on here. I mean, those are the kind of details that I think that we need to make a proper decision, and,
Drawings of the shed with the appropriate dimensions.
I mean, whether Mr. Tyler does them himself or whether he hires somebody to do it, I just think, scaled, detailed drawings
scale,
that
yeah.
are more precise than what we were offered with the application.
I mean, I don't even have a property line on the other side of the house, so it's like falling off the page. And I want to be fair in my decision-making here, and I don't feel I have adequate information to do that.
Yes, because one of the, obviously, all of the 5 criteria are important in this case, that we have the abutters speaking, and, why this property, why this location, and substantial justice are answered by those review of the property.
So
So that's the
this,
motion.
Mr. Tyler can do his own scale of the
Absolutely.
property. Oh, okay. I didn't want him to have to.
Piece of
go-
graph paper and
Yeah,
draw it out.
and then where everything is located.
And it would behoove him to either do the best job or get somebody to do a very good job for him, because this is one of the criteria that we are asking for in order for us to continue it.
Okay.
And also, Derek, there's no such thing as a fence being grandfathered. It's got here grandfathered, is there? Isn't it just a dwelling unit that would be grandfathered before a certain year?
There's different grandfathering in our zoning ordinance, but fences would not be included that,
I think that's what he's got, I'm like,
but I think a lot of people use that term.
yeah.
Because it weighs a lot.
Which would indicate,
Sounds
though, a more precise showing of the property line on
Yeah.
that side.
So Kathy,
because my grandfather told me so.
it's important, he loved it. So Kathy has a motion.
Yes.
I heard a second motion coming in. Do you still agree with that? Any
Absolutely.
discussion on the motion, further discussion? Okay, so the public hearing is still open. We're gonna leave the public hearing open to come back for this information that we're asking for in Kathy's motion, and more detailed to-scale drawing of the property and the shed, in this case, with features that help us make a decision.
Yes, yes.
Okay? And Vivian's the voting member of the alternates here, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, 5-0-0. Mr. Tyler, I know it's 30 more days before you can finish up the shed and get the building permit. Do you understand what we've asked of you?
A little bit, the drawing, architectural plan, I do that.
Please get with Derek to help me, he can clarify exactly what we've asked for you and what the expectations are. All right, thank you. All right, thank you all who spoke on that. Sorry to extend it 30 more days or so to the October meeting. But I think it's what was fair this evening. Okay, we're gonna move on to the next application. I'm gonna also, unless there's any other issues with that one, ask Vivian to also vote on application number 4. Len's gonna get 5 and 6, so just prepare yourself, Len. Number 4, Ruth Williamson, applicant, is seeking a variance to allow the construction of a 3-season porch and deck that will be set back 16 feet 2 inches from the front property line. Whereas section 4.3 of the Goffstown zoning ordinance requires a 25-foot front yard setback. Property is located at 48 Higgins Street, which is map 17, lot 197-2, in a residential 2 district. Prior to the public hearing, the ZBA needs to vote on regional impact. Any motions or comment on regional impact?
Make a motion, there's no regional impact.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
abstain, or against. 5-0-0. Ruth Williamson or someone, ma'am, please come forward. Okay. All right, we won't force you into this situation then. You stand by to answer questions though. So, sir, please state your name.
Hi, Kurt Lauer from Lauer Architects in town, on behalf of Ruth.
Just by way of disclosure, Mr. Lauer and I have known each other for a number of years.
Better or worse?
Well, you're lucky you're not voting on this one then, Len, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be put in that situation. Sir, please go forward. What are you wanting to do on this property?
The plans that have been submitted show a small porch and 3-season porch, unheated, with a deck on the front side, if you will, or the street side of the property.
Okay.
Show.
In a nutshell. So in the application that was submitted from Ms. Williamson, spoke to, we're looking at a front yard setback issue.
Correct.
We're looking at a 21-foot by 9-foot 6-inch 3-season porch, no heat, and a small deck on the west side of the house, which is the front side of the house. Zoning ordinance, so it's gonna encroach into the setback, it's stated by 8 feet 2 inches?
This wasn't surveyed. I did go out and measure, I found the granite bounds and triangulated the house, so it's pretty darn close, but it wasn't a technical survey.
Pretty close, 2 inches, so, you got a scale there. And we speak to the 5 variance criteria, because we're seeking a variance here. The application speaks to public interest. Did you have anything you want to present on these things, or just let the application speak for itself?
Speak for itself, yeah.
We have a discussion about public interest, keeping with the size and style of similar structures in the vicinity, property values enhanced, no conflicts with sightlines or pedestrian traffic. Spirit of the ordinance observed. substantial justice. Surrounding property values and hardship criteria. Anyone have any questions?
Why off the front, not the back?
Right.
Because she wants to be able to enjoy the evening, the warmer sun. She's got a small deck on the back right now, which is in the shade all the time, and she wants to get into the sunny side of the house. So
The house faces,
if you look in the site plan, with north to your left, that makes.
I see, okay. So it
the
would face
western
west.
side, correct, yeah.
You could sit on the front porch and watch the sunset.
And, yeah, you know, and not a day like today, but, you know, another month or so, and it's still 60 degrees outside, or 50 degrees outside in the afternoon.
Right.
In the sun, it would be still warm out there.
Looking at the picture on the vision card here, how would that alter the look of the front of the house as far as, you're talking about extending out from the roof line?
Obviously, it would look much better.
Yeah.
There is on the third 11 by 17 fold-out, there's a front elevation drawing. It's not a perspective, but there's front elevation and side elevation. Yep, that one. So it'd be a gable of the same pitch of the existing house coming out perpendicular to it.
Does that become the main entrance, or is that a?
The main entrance is there now, we're
Yeah.
just being kind of enclosing it.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Say something? Again, I went to see this piece of property and measured it. And from what we measured, all he's covering is, if you notice at the driveway, the sidewalk. That's as far as they're going with that porch. That's 9 feet, probably 10 feet. But they're going to 9.6, I guess. So all they're doing is covering, from what we saw, is that sidewalk that she has. Am I correct?
Yeah.
All right. And driving around the neighborhood, I've found 10 porches in front of the home. That's my comment.
Did you really? I
Yeah.
drove by there yesterday at 3 and I didn't see.
I lived there for a while, so.
I live in the near
Sharon
neighborhood.
Ave and Plymouth Street had 3, I believe.
Okay.
So the, when you're expanding out from the, front wall of the house, you're not going further than the, walkway that exists there now?
Within inches.
Within
of it,
inches,
yeah.
okay.
That's my only comment.
Any other questions for the applicant?
What's the size of this, addition? Square footage, do you know offhand? Roughly?
About 200 square feet, give or take, 9 by 27, something like that.
Okay.
9 foot 6 by 21.3 is a three-season porch, so around 200 square feet.
So you're actually enclosing the walkway?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, one of the things I noticed when I did my drive around, that there are probably not too many houses that are closer to the front property line, I would say. I would say that some, that have the porches and things, that's what I was looking for, but I also look for, see, how does it match, or is there a lot of properties close to the property line and things, and, which will come up in another application tonight,
Right.
but, so I think this house could be definitely enhanced with this thing in the front as well.
Actually,
It looks-
58 Higgins, just like 3 houses down, the entire house is probably about 10 feet back. It's the only one in the area, but the entire house is
Yeah,
pulled
I
up.
put a few and underlined it
Yeah.
when I had that. All right?
I should have gone with you.
Yeah, no, we gotta watch how many people go out, because it becomes a public meeting then, see.
And no emailing.
I figured it was my own neighborhood, all this stuff here.
So any last questions? All right, thank you. So you could've done that, ma'am, you could've done that, no problem. Anyone else here speaking on behalf of the application? Any abutters speaking against the application? Any interested parties? Anyone that wants to speak? Okay, any other questions for the public before we close it? All right, I'm gonna close the public hearing, opening for deliberations or motions.
I'll make a motion to accept.
I'll
To
second-
approve.
I'll second that.
And no issues with their application and the 5 criteria is laid out, any adjustments?
You can go over them if you'd like.
No, we don't have to. You're good?
Yeah.
Good.
I agree with the motion, in that the, walkway already exists there and that, there is no, there is minimal, if no, more expansion beyond the walkway that exists, for the footprint of this addition.
All right, if no other comments, we had a first, tell me who again was the first?
And
Ed,
Vivian.
and Vivian was the second.
Mm.
All right, yeah, so no other comments, all those in approving this application as written, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstained? Congratulations, Mr. Williamson. Make it look good.
We'll be over on the cold days to sit on your
Yeah,
warm
sit on the
porch.
My
It is-
neighbors are all waiting because they want me to throw a party.
It is a beautiful sun,
those
your
are good
direction
neighbors.
there.
Forget the neighbors, we want.
Yeah. What comes your special guest? Isn't she cute, huh?
Okay, so for the next application, I'm gonna ask, thank you, Vivian, for voting, and on those last ones, I'm gonna ask Len if he, unless he has no objection, to take the next one.
I don't know.
So, number 5, Gregory and Allison Murray,
Be interesting to
applicants,
see.
are seeking a variance to allow the construction of a farmer's porch that will be set back approximately 11 feet from the front property line, whereas section 4.3 of the Goffstown zoning ordinance requires a 25-foot front yard setback. The property is located at 20 Heald Street,
yes.
map 14, lot 45, in a residential 2 district, and prior to the public hearing, the ZBA needs to vote on regional impact. Any motions on regional
I make a
impact?
motion that it has no regional impact.
Second.
Okay, there's a first by Kathy, a second by Gail. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Vivian, your vote didn't count.
Okay. I figured I'd help you back.
5-0-0. Just gotta make sure we're legal.
Yeah.
Don't know who's gonna sue when we're
Yeah.
done.
Not me, that's for sure.
Okay, so you are,
Gregory Murray.
okay? Please, what are you asking approval for?
Want to put a farmer's porch in the front of my house. It's 30 feet long, 6 feet out. Nothing, no additional rooms, just a farmer's porch. It's a ranch.
What's a farmer's porch?
What is a farmer's porch?
I know what a 3-season porch is. Farmer's porch is
Just a regular outdoor porch, spindles,
No screening.
no screen, no nothing.
no windows.
No, nope, just a
Okay,
regular
steps.
porch. You sit out there in a rocking chair.
Okay,
Railings, yep. Yep. Actually, I think you should have a drawing of it.
Yeah, our copies kinda came through.
Yeah, we tried to get it as
Oh,
dark
okay,
as possible.
okay. But yeah, it has a railing, it's nothing special, it's just gonna make the property look better. I live right beside the oil tank, so.
I saw that. Are they good neighbors?
Quiet, right?
They're quiet, that's for sure.
Yeah. Okay, any additional comments you wanna make on your application?
No, sir, everybody in my neighborhood doesn't, they want me to do it. They got all the paperwork, you know, you guys sent all the letters out, and everybody said it was okay at the time, so.
So you're looking for a variance, and the variance, again, has got 5 criteria. And the variance is because you're gonna be building inside the 25-foot setback.
Correct.
Is your house right now inside the 25-foot front yard
It's
setback?
27 feet off the road.
And I saw that you have a line that says the the property line is 9 feet inside the
Correct.
property, road.
Correct.
So that would mean that your house already is in the 25-foot front yard
Right.
setback. Okay, so you're asking to increase your nonconformity.
Correct.
All right, just wanna make sure that
Yep,
we all
yep,
understand what we're doing
yep.
here. So you speak to, that it's not contrary to public interest, you're speaking to that all the abutters have agreed.
Correct.
The spirit of the ordinance is observed, because it won't cause a detriment to the neighborhood, and doesn't, what is that word you say there? Derogate,
I don't have that copy.
okay.
That's probably something my wife wrote.
Ah, that's why the good handwriting, because I can't write
Yeah.
as well.
Where are you?
Derogate?
Derogate from the, or deviate, I bet it's a
Oh,
deviate.
derogate.
from the
Doesn't
intent of
deviate.
the
I'm looking
zoning law.
derogate, that's not a.
Yeah, doesn't deviate.
Yeah.
Yes, you
deviate
can
from
see,
the
I just
intent
came
of the
from
zoning
work,
law.
so that's why.
Also, appropriate use of the porch will be observed, spirit of the ordinance. Okay. Speak to substantial justice, the porch would enhance the front of the dwelling, it will not impose on abutting properties. The value of surrounding properties will not be diminished because updating our house will create a positive value for the neighborhood and enhance curb appeal. And the fifth, why is it a hardship if you can't do it? You say that it won't affect the roads, the yard is fenced in already, and it will only enhance the home area and an improvement to the dwelling.
Correct.
Okay? Anybody have questions?
Yeah, I do, I do. The picture that we have that was submitted with our packet, of your home, looks like you have 2 driveways?
Yes. Because the garage goes down, the garage is down bottom, the house is up top.
Okay, you have a driveway that goes off on Heald?
Holly and Heald.
Holly and Heald. Okay. The driveway that goes off Holly seems to go to, is it a garage? Is it
Yes.
a building?
Yes.
When I looked at a map of that, when I looked at, one of our
The area view.
maps, or what, it stated that that was a deck? Was that a deck at one?
No, there was it's on there as a pool, and we crossed it off. There was a pool.
It
back.
showed a pool and it showed a deck, but I
No.
don't remember it ever saying a
No,
garage.
it just showed a pool. The garage has been there since I bought the house, so.
Oh, this is what I'm looking at. I'm looking at this card. And it shows your house.
Yeah,
Then it shows, what's an FAP? An enclosed finished porch.
oh yeah, that's on the back of the house. That's on the back of the house.
And this deck,
There's no deck.
it says a wood deck on it, on the assessor's card.
See, she's referring to that.
WDK, yeah,
Oh.
wood deck.
Yes, this is an enclosed porch in the back of the house, and
Okay.
yes, there's a deck there. I'm
And that-
sorry.
And that, the garage is in addition to all 3 of those items?
Well,
One
the
being
garage,
house.
everything that's there was there when I bought the house.
So the question is the garage on the assessor's card?
It should be.
Is it underneath the wood deck, or?
No,
It is, it's shown if you go to outbuildings, FGR1, garage, 400 square feet.
Okay.
yeah, that was
You
all,
See where that, it's on that same page on the,
So because it's not attached, it wouldn't be on the drawing?
it's an outbuilding, they don't always draw in the outbuildings.
Okay.
Normally, it's just the primary building and any attached
Yeah.
that they
Okay.
will include on that, but each property's done
it's a
differently.
two-car garage in the back.
In understanding the property, though, it'd be roughly in this corner.
Yeah, it's the next street down, right there in that corner.
Okay, and so in relation to your house, if this is your deck, it's gonna be
Yes,
right over
Yes.
here,
Yep.
fitting into that.
exactly,
So the front porch would be on which street?
on Heald.
On Heald.
You're talking about basically, since I'm looking at 22 by 36, going
Yep.
across the
Across the
entire
front of the,
width
across the front of the
house.
building, correct.
Do you have this picture?
I do,
So
and I
it's-
wrote Heald Street down here.
This is Heald right here.
Right,
So it's right there.
right in the front there.
Correct.
And that other driveway was put in, or is there because,
I was there when I bought the house. I bought the house the way it is.
it had 2 driveways?
Yes.
When you bought the house?
Yeah. That's why I paid more taxes, because I have 2 driveways.
Amazing, huh?
This is a corner lot, and
And
you've
do
got
you
Yes.
still have
substantial
It-
Do you
footage
still have
on
the pool
both
back
streets.
there?
There used to be, but when I bought it, there wasn't. But on the old aerial view, there was a pool.
When they did the The
Yeah, 'cause I saw that.
flyover in
Yes.
2001 it's shown, but if
Yes.
you'll see, it is not listed.
not listed.
It's not listed on here, the assessor has
Right.
removed it from the assessment.
Yes,
Because it is on some of the maps that we
Yeah,
had.
but
Yeah.
there isn't one.
Okay. So, and the reason why you want to put the porch on the front and not on the back where,
Because my wife wants it on the front.
That's why she wrote the application.
Farmers' porches generally go on the front of the house.
They do.
Yeah.
And plus, that's where the sun sets, in the front of our house.
got that from the last one. And how much feet again do you have from your side of the house to the street?
From the front.
From the front to the field?
From the house, or, it's 18 feet from my property line, but I have 27 feet to the road.
The property line isn't up against the road.
Right.
Porch will be 20 feet off the road.
'Cause how wide is the porch gonna be?
6 feet.
6 feet.
Do you have steps coming out the front there?
Nope, they're gonna go off to the side of the driveway.
What do you have there now?
There's steps there now,
And how far out do they go?
they're 6 feet. But if I put the porch on, I don't wanna put stairs in the front to extend it even more. I'm gonna go out to the side driveway, on the side.
So the front porch is gonna go as far as the existing stairs are?
Correct.
Vivian, so you measured the other property, did you measure this one too?
No, because we were gonna go out there, but the people were outside,
I had a dog that was looking at me, so I didn't get out, but,
so.
I was the dog in my yard.
I tell ya, 27 feet, whew, that's maybe. I think this house is right on top of the road. I was looking at it, I was staring at it, trying to figure out how big this is gonna be. And where you have a fence out front that's not right on the road, it looked to be
Right.
about 3 feet or so
3
off the
feet, yep.
road.
Correct.
Right now, the house is 27 feet from the road.
That's what he has measured, but I tell ya. Did you drive by the property?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we stopped and the woman came out, what do you want? And I said, oh, we're just looking at the property.
Well, you have the right to ask. You're right, I've never done either. You could say, I'm part of the zoning board and I'm
I
looking at
just
the
said I'm an
property.
alternate
Exactly
right
what you
now.
did.
Yeah.
I didn't wanna test the dog though, so,
He's friendly, don't worry,
yeah.
as long as you have treats.
Which I did not have. Any other questions? Mr. Murray,
I have no other questions,
okay.
all I'm looking for is answers.
Is there any,
Oh, your wife.
Call my wife. Oh, it's real good. This better not be on television.
well, let me, it is, and it's recorded and you can always get it off the website. So,
On demand on the town website.
I'm gonna ask a couple questions, so.
Go right ahead.
If we're looking at the variance, and if I say I don't like it, so tell me, if I don't do it, if I deny it, what am I losing of, what substantial justice am I denying it? Why do
Why
you
would
have
you,
the
why would you deny it?
I'm asking you
My
why
question.
you need it so that I'm forced to approve it. So why,
Just
what are
to-
you losing out on if you don't get to have it? If we deny
Livability.
this application, what do you lose?
Livability. I wanna have an extra place to go sit with my wife. That's our whole thing. This is what we want on our house. And I'm not asking to put an addition on, I'm not asking to put another bedroom in. All we want is a farmer's porch.
And
And nobody in my neighborhood will disagree.
when I did the drive around, I noticed there was a couple of properties. I would say this is probably putting it, one of the few that would be this close to the property line, having that, farmer's porch put on. I made a note that I saw number 2 and number 12 Heald are probably closer now. But if you put the farmer's porch on, you'd be definitely closer than 12 Heald. I don't know if you can get much closer than 2 Heald.
Well,
2 Heald is
actually, my
right there.
neighbor, if you look at my driveway and his house and where I'm putting the farmer's porch, they line right up.
Really?
They line right up.
Yeah. Your neighbor is what number?
I'm 20, so he's,
Could be 18 or 16
Yeah,
or something
yeah.
like that. Yeah, 12 wasn't right next to you,
no,
so-
it's not.
I tried to do a drive around to do a comparison to see what it's like in the neighborhood.
Oh, no,
Obviously, your
that's-
neighbors do
that's
the
fine.
same thing to see, you know, are they building on the property line, how far back? Okay, and then, so the hardship is, you know, why your property, why are you special that you can build closer than you're already?
I understand that. I don't think I'm special. I just,
Your property, not you. why is
right,
Your
right.
property special.
It'll just, it'll just, everybody in the neighborhood wants me to do it. I wish they would've all showed up, but they're all tired.
So instead of 25 feet, you have 20 feet. That's what we're saying, right?
To the
How,
road.
how far out in the front of your house do the stairs, in this picture, do they come out now?
6 feet.
6 feet?
Yep.
So you're looking to go 3 more feet?
No,
No.
my stairs that come out of my house right now
Yeah.
are 6 feet away from my front
6
door.
feet away from the front door, and
I'm
how
just-
big is the porch gonna be
6 feet.
out?
6
6 feet.
feet. I'm
So
just
you're
gonna-
not coming out any further
Nope,
than your
I'm
front
covering the
steps are
front
already?
steps, and that's it.
So going back to Vivian, you're speaking to, it's 27 feet from the front of the house to the road.
Correct.
And only
The road.
18 feet,
To my
18
property
feet
line.
to the
18
property.
feet to the property line. So if you add 6, now it's only 12 feet from the front of the porch to the edge of the property line. The application
When was
says
this house built?
approximately 11.
Right.
1970.
So it's pretty close.
Do
Yeah.
you know what the front,
I think
has there
he's
been a
scared me,
change
that's
in
why.
the front yard setback since 1970?
Potentially, I don't know off the top of my head, to
Okay.
be perfectly honest with you.
I would have to say that we have had many similar applications before us, some being on the back road to Goffstown, where we had
Bernardville section.
the Bernardville section, where we have had these properties that have been built within the setback, and had stairs that came out, and because they did not go, the new construction, whether it be a deck or a 3-season porch or whatever, because it did not exceed the area that the steps came towards the street, we approved the applications because there was no additional expansion towards the street. And I think that we've been quite consistent with our thinking on that.
I know you've asked that in at
Yeah.
least one other application tonight. And you asked also where the steps gonna be in the front, and he answered that they're gonna be on the side.
Side, so
Correct.
he's not going out any further towards Heald Street.
Okay, any other questions?
The end
from
of the
applicant?
the front end of the farmer's porch is still gonna be 12 feet from the property line, which is where the end of the steps are right now.
Anyway,
It's 12 feet
correct.
from the property line.
Right.
So we're really not coming out any further. What we're doing is adding some volume to the front of the house.
And the application says approximately 11 feet, so
Right.
it's consistent with the application.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's why I decided to put the stairs going out towards the driveway, so I didn't take out any more in the front.
Right.
That was a good decision, I think.
All right, any other questions? Mr. Murray?
No questions for me, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any abutters, or let me first ask anybody here speaking on behalf of the applicant? Any abutters speaking against the application? Any interested parties? Anybody who wishes to speak? All right, thank you, Mr. Murray.
Thank you very much.
Any last questions before I close the public hearing? Issues? All right, I'm gonna close the public hearing on this application, open it for motions and deliberation.
I can't vote.
Nope. And
I
you can't-
talked to the
you're the-
gentleman.
And you can't consult the deliberation
I know.
technically.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Any other discussion? I just, yeah, you know,
I agree to approve it based upon the fact that there is no additional increase with the width of the front porch beyond the stairs that exist there now.
Depth of
the depth of the porch.
Okay, yeah, it's, you know, I made my comments and I thought it was pretty close, but, tight. Okay, so first and a second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Abstain or against, I'm actually gonna vote against that, this one. 1-0. Congratulations. Wasn't unanimous, but it was a good decision.
I know that. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay,
So after we go to Ruth's house.
Everybody have a good night.
Thanks.
thank you. Okay, for the last application this evening, it is not a unique one. I shouldn't say that. It is a unique one, although we know how to manage this. So we have, the Goffstown Planning Board is seeking an appeal from an administrative classification of use made by the zoning code enforcement officer. On July 22nd, 2010, the ZCO, the zoning code enforcement officer, made the administrative classification that a salvage automobile broker be classified under the category of, quote, sale or rental of motor vehicles, boats, trailers, and recreational vehicles, unquote. The appeal was submitted on August 19th, 2010, in accordance with section 15.3.3 of the Goffstown zoning ordinance. Actually, that differs here. So on the agenda for this evening, it was stated prior to the public hearing, the ZBA needs to vote on regional impact. However, on the staff review, said probably don't have to do it.
I'll leave it up to you. As
Okay.
It doesn't, the statute talks about a proposed development.
Yeah.
And this is not specific to one property or another.
Okay, any motions on that?
I don't think we need to make a motion on the regional impact because it's not a definitive piece of property. It's just, it's a concept, and the attorney Pansiak, I believe, is that her name, it was just getting a finding, a feeling from Derek as to how it would be interpreted, but there's no absolute property here, so I don't know how you could say it makes a regional impact when you don't know what the region is that it would be impacting.
I looked at the items that you do make an assessment on, whether it determines regional impact or not. I think we should make have a finding that says we don't need it. I'm gonna make a motion that we do not need to vote on regional impact on this
I'll
application.
second that.
Any comments? And Len, you're the voting member on this one, so all those in favor that this does not need a regional impact vote, say aye.
Aye.
Against or abstain, so 5-0. So who is here speaking on behalf of the planning board? Okay, so you could decide which one's which.
Brian Rose is the planner, I'm Alan Dayton, the planning board chairman.
You need to figure out between the two of you who wants to speak for the planning board.
Speaking first, and I'm speaking.
Okay. Mr. Rose, please come forward.
This was in our packet last meeting.
And you are Mr. Rose.
Brian Rose, town staff,
Okay,
planning staff.
what's your objection?
Mr. Chair and members of the board, thank you for this opportunity. At the planning board, the last planning board hearing, August 12th, let's see, no, I'm sorry. At the last planning board meeting on August 12th, the planning board reviewed a decision by Derek from July 22nd to allow for a use of a salvage automobile broker, and that would be classified under the category of sale or rental of motor vehicles, boats, trailers, and recreational vehicles. The planning board gave several reasons why they felt that should not be allowed under that use, and so I wanted to go through each of those reasons. First reason was that they felt that it was inconsistent with the town's master plan. One of the goals under Principle 6 of recommended land use and growth principles and actions states that the town wants to protect environmental quality by minimizing impacts from human activities and planning for and maintaining natural areas and natural resources that contribute to the health and quality of life of Goffstown and its residents. Now, a use such as this would allow vehicles to be parked for several days on a lot. And in the email from Pat Panciaco, she stated that it could be anywhere from 60 to 70 days, maybe more, maybe less. Those vehicles are in a state of disrepair, if that can be even the word to describe it. But they've been damaged through accidents or have been just determined a total loss from accidents on the road. And the problem with vehicles such as this is that they would potentially be hazardous and leaking hazardous materials, fluids into the ground that while they would be sitting there on the lot. And so in order to protect our environmental quality here in Goffstown, we feel that this use would be contrary to the goals that our master plan sets forth. The second reason was that it's inconsistent with the development regulations. Under Appendix C for stormwater management, Section 1, for low impact development, and for subsection A2, which talks about low impact site plan development. The goal under that section is to minimize impervious area by designing with minimum pavement widths and avoiding excess parking. Well, number one, if you guys took a look at the images from what Pat Panciaco submitted, those images portray a sea of parking. It's not just a parking lot for a small business or even a large business. Some big box stores would have less parking than what's shown in these images. But nonetheless, it would also require either a paved surface in order to not have those fluids leaking into the ground, or you would have a sea of asphalt sitting on that lot, which would contribute to the heat island effect and also just be an eyesore of a parking lot to the town. So that was the second reason. The third reason is it's not a specifically permitted use. It's an interpretation that is being made by Derek, and that is one of his roles to interpret the zoning ordinance. However, the planning board felt when they discussed this in their meeting that this was not a use that they felt should be permitted within our ordinance, that if it were to be a proposed use and it were to be brought up to them to add it as a use in the use table, they would have denied it and not allowed it. So the fact that it is not stated clearly in the ordinance that this use is permitted was another one of their reasons for appealing this decision. Also, it doesn't quite fit into the category that Derek has placed it into. That is the category of sale or rental of motor vehicles, boats, trailers, and recreational vehicles. When I think of that, and I believe the planning board was kind of on the same line as that, you think of sale of new vehicles or maybe used vehicles. This is a totally different category of sales, and that's junk vehicles, very severely damaged vehicles. And just having that as a use, again, would be detrimental, I think, to the town as far as visual impacts would go. Driving down the street, you would see a junkyard full of broken down vehicles that may or may not stay there for an extended period of time. The last, and I think the strongest argument that we have against this decision is that the zoning ordinance itself defines what a junkyard is, and I want to read a portion of that definition. And what it states is that junkyard motor vehicle is defined by the ordinance specifies it's any business and any place of storage or deposit, whether in connection with another business or not, which has stored or deposited two or more unregistered motor vehicles which are no longer intended or in condition for legal use on the public highways. After that is an or, and it goes into some other portions of description, basically going into, whether or not they're going to take vehicles apart. But the defining word in that definition is the or. So it can be one thing or it can be another thing, and any of those categories within that definition would classify this as a junkyard. So per our own definition, we don't allow a junkyard. It's nowhere in the zoning ordinance as a permitted use. It's only in there as a definition, and I think that also goes to say that the town did not want that as an allowed use under their ordinance. None of these vehicles would be really in the condition for legal use on public highways. Part of the discussion was that none of these vehicles would most likely be registered vehicles. They're going to purchase these vehicles from whomever is getting rid of them, and hold them and then sell them to either a used car dealer who can fix them up or a junkyard themselves, another junkyard, I guess. But in the meantime, they most likely would not be going to the expense, which it would be a very costly expense, to register each of these vehicles. And the definition really limits that by stating two or more unregistered vehicles is classified as a junkyard. So, I mean, if they were to even get a couple of these, they would be classified as a junkyard, let alone the list of or the pictures that they've provided that show several hundred or even several thousand, I'm not sure. And they did state in their email that the size of the operation would be smaller than what's shown in the attached photos, but smaller means what? That's sort of a hard term to define unless they define it in specific numbers. So that was where the heartburn came from on the side of the planning board. The last thing I just wanted to bring up is that the NAICS codes that were attached did not have automobile sales or automobile salvage broker as one of the similar uses under sales and things like that. So
ICS code is what?
NAICS.
NAICS.
Yeah, it's attached to Derek's letter. It's basically
North American Industry Classification.
industry. Yeah, exactly. It classifies different types of businesses into codes, and the Census Bureau uses those in classifying all of their information. So,
Okay.
I'd be happy to answer any questions, or else I can turn the time over to Mr. Yeaton and We can do questions afterwards.
Any questions? I'm saving my questions to the
I
end.
just wanna know, was this a piece of property that's been proposed to be used?
No.
Has not.
So,
It was not. It was a determination, and maybe Derek can speak to this better, but he got a request from Ms. Panciaco to basically state whether or not the use would be allowed in the town, and so was asked to give a determination as to what the zoning ordinance would allow and what it wouldn't allow. And so that was kind of where this letter originated.
don't we have one in town, Hebert's or something, that, some sort of a resale of automobiles and parts?
Yeah, my opinion is that's a different use, but I don't know if you want me to talk about that more after.
Yeah, when we get to Derek, we'll
Okay.
let him speak on how he made the determination. Any other questions for Mr. Rose? Okay, thank you. Mr. Eaton?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. I got elected to be here,
All right.
so I'm here.
Unanimous, was it?
Excuse me?
Unanimous, was it?
Yes, it was. No one else, you don't see anybody else behind me, do you? Well, anyways, this was a great topic of discussion at the planning board meeting in August. And to the board, there's a technical application here that hasn't been met. And one, in the ordinance is specific. It specifically says, I can call Derek, I can ask him a question, but he can tell me what he thinks, but he can't give me an opinion until he gets an application in writing by the landowner, and it's spelled out in the zoning ordinance. He refers to it in his page 2 of his report. He cannot give an opinion until he has a written application from the landowner. So, without saying a further ado, it's inappropriate to come up with a written opinion until there's a specific piece of property and there's a written application made in some form. He can give them what he thinks, just like I can give somebody what I think is the answer,
But not on behalf of your planning board.
but not on behalf of the town. Now, the ordinance is very specific. It does not allow junkyards at all. There is no mention, other than in the definition of the ordinance, any provisions for a junkyard. It is, by definition, it's one of three things. As Brian said, it's the storage of 2 or more unregistered vehicles that are not intended or a condition for legal use on the highways. And that's exactly what they're proposing to do anyways, because you can't drive them and they're unregisterable. They're not roadworthy. It readily admits in the correspondence. So without taking this any further, I don't believe the zoning code administrator has a right to give a written opinion, and neither does the board, without having an application submitted by a landowner, by definition in the zoning ordinance.
Can you tell me where in his response he states that?
Page 2.
Page 2, where on page 2?
3.3, classifications of uses not specified or changes in use, and that's a verbatim paragraph from our zoning ordinance.
Where are you again here on this?
On page, Derek's page 2 of 5.
Two to five, two.
And it starts 3.3, classification of uses not specified, and I think it's the third line down. Starting on the
Yep.
left-hand side. So, when in fact, I could call, and I do many a times professionally, call people to get an idea as to what the situation might be and what I might have to do in terms of an application and the process. And then I can apply, and then I can get a written opinion of what I need to do and what the infractions are, if any. Because you really can't respond to it at this board until you have one. You need a denial or you need an opinion to be here.
I'm gonna save any other comments and reference this report till after I hear what Derek has to say and what the members of the board here have to say.
Okay. All right.
I don't
I'll
wanna,
save my question then too.
I don't wanna preclude anything.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mead. Anyone speaking again for the town, or the planning board in this case? Derek?
Is it all right if I
Sure.
remain seated here? And I guess, how would you like me to approach this? Would you like me to explain my process? Because I think what Alan has reached is a critical question. I did not receive a written request from the property owner on a classification. I received a written request from an interested party in developing in the town of Goffstown, and I went forward with that. And in hindsight, that was a mistake, but at the same time, if you don't rule on this specific use in terms of the zoning ordinance, and you simply rule on that, and a property owner comes to me tomorrow, I will make the same exact decision, and I can explain that decision and why I made it.
Okay.
When Attorney Panciaco came to me, she stated, and if it's a little bit easier if you follow along with my letter that's attached to their appeal. She gave me 5 bullet points of this is what the business is. So I open up the zoning ordinance and I look at the table of principal uses, and we do not have auto salvage broker in there. And despite what you've heard already tonight, that does not mean it is not permitted. If you look at table 3.1, or section 3.1, table of principal uses, it says that land may be used or occupied except for the purposes permitted in the base district for which the use is located as set forth in the table of principal uses. And then further down on 3.3, it says when a use is not specified in the zoning ordinance, the zoning code enforcement officer shall determine the administrative classification of the proposed use and whether it's permitted by right, special exception, conditional use permit, or not permitted. Our ordinance does not have a blanket provision that if it's not in the table of principal uses, it is not permitted. Some ordinances do have that every use must be specifically permitted, otherwise it is not. Our ordinance does not. It says, look to the table of principal uses. If it's not there, find the most similar in characteristic and function. And that is what I did, and I tried to explain that in my letter.
And before you go on to that, the planning board makes the assertion that essentially in the definitions in our zoning ordinance that we classify what a junkyard is.
They do.
The definition, as I read it, does not describe that it is a permitted or not permitted use in the definition.
There is a definition for junkyard, and however, that is not in the table of principal uses. I'll also point you to the definition of manufactured home on Roman numeral 9. It provides a definition of manufactured home, and when you flip to page 10 of the zoning ordinance, and you look at our manufactured homes permitted in the town of Goffstown, in every district, there is a line denoting that manufactured homes are not permitted in any district. Manufactured home parks are, but manufactured homes on their own are not permitted. So the planning board in that use has specifically said, this is not a permitted use. With junkyard, they define it and they give the definition, a very detailed, thorough definition of what it is, but when you go into the table of principal uses, it is not provided there.
Okay.
So again, that's where I found the most similar in functions and characteristics. And unfortunately, the zoning ordinance does not direct me to look at the master plan or the development regs as stated in the appeal. But as you'll see, in the 3 districts where, based on my determination, it's permitted by special exception, the first criteria for special exception points to the master plan. It must be a use consistent with the master plan. And then for development regs, in no way does my administrative classification waive the requirements of site plan review or waive any of the authority of the planning board, and that was not my intention. This was simply to give a potential developer a guidelines of this is the road you'll follow when you come in. These are the approvals you need. not give a blanket approval that these pictures that you have submitted with your application, this is what you will get. That was not the purpose of this classification. It was simply that the most similar use is sale of vehicles. And these are the zones it's permitted in by special exception, and these are the zones it's not permitted in. So that is how I came to my decision.
Okay. Any questions of Derek?
At a meeting, a zoning board meeting, I remember some issue being brought up that has to do with state RSAs that say, very similar to what you're saying, is that if it is not addressed in our ordinances, then it can be considered acceptable, or you can find something similar to base your decision on. However, in our ordinances, and this is where I get a little gray, don't want to say that too loud, in that it is defined in our ordinances, and the people who have developed our zoning ordinances did take the time to identify what a term of a junkyard is. So, and then you go into the fact that they do have an area that does speak to motor vehicle sales and services. And to me, it is specific that they do not allow junkyards because they did not bring it in as a principal use when they in fact have identified it as in the definitions of the ordinance. So there had to have been consideration given, because it not being there to me speaks volumes that it is not allowed, junkyards.
Right.
And that's where I'm going with it.
Okay, so do you have any questions for Derek?
We do have a junkyard now, don't we?
Yes.
Or is it
That was
gone?
your-
And that's the last one we have.
The only one that has a annual license that they renew.
Do you have any questions for Derek?
No, but I also want to say, in all fairness to Derek and everybody who has also spoken here, Derek's opinions, and I think you stated this too, Derek's opinions are not necessarily the opinions of the voting board. And we've had this time and time again where people have come in, they've asked a question of the zoning code officer, he has given an answer to it, and we will vote. And there has been maybe an instance where we voted that his interpretation was not and cannot be confused with the voting and the interpretations by the members of the zoning board. So, if anyone is to put any weight on this as to being what the zoning board would accept with an application, then they have stretched, in my opinion, the weight of his opinion.
Okay. I'm gonna ask Derek again. So, Mr. Eaton had the question that specified, that said, because there was no application in this case, you didn't have an obligation to provide a decision. You didn't have the requirement to determine administrative classification, in fact, that administrative classification has no meaning. Do you, if an applicant subsequently to this determination that you made, they came in with, they wanted to produce this salvage auto broker at a location, specific location, a specific zone, district, you would make the same, you would do the same thing as you did before. You would determine administrative classification of proposed use, and whether the use is a use permitted by right, special exception, conditional use permit, or other approval. You would still follow those steps to
I
determine
would
how to
still
process
follow
it.
the steps that are under section 3 for an administration or administrative classification of use that's not specified. In this case, I did not have a specific site, but again, when I think you're looking at a use in terms of the zoning ordinance, especially when it's not specified, you can't make a determination on whether that use is allowed or not when you're looking at a specific property. I know that is what the zoning ordinance calls for, but I don't think that'd be fair to the property owners to look at each property and say, well, okay, now that I look at it, I don't think it's allowed, and try and make it fit into a certain category. I think in this case, it was actually a little bit easier because you don't know where the property is, you don't know what zone it's going to be in. You simply just have to look at section 3.3 and 3.3.1 and say, what is it most similar to in use?
Right. But what I'm getting at is, so someone did come together with an application that identified a specific zone, a specific piece of property, you would reevaluate that application against the criteria in 3.3 and 3.3.1.
Yes.
Any other questions? We'll get back to you. All right, Derek, thank you.
I don't have a question, I have a little bit of history. May I give it? 1985, 86, there might have been an article, there was an article placed in, for the town meeting. The article was not to allow any junkyards in this area or in Goffstown. I don't know how extensive the article was, but the junkyard was right at the end, right where the cemetery is off North Mass Road. Huge junkyard. I mean, he sold cars, he sold parts, he sold batteries, he sold tires. Everything you could think of. This man had a big, I mean, he had 13 acres, so his junkyard was near the river. So anyway, he decided he was gonna sell it and move to Montana. I have to tell you, there may have been a standing ovation every time a big truck went by with all his junk to get it out of town. And we bought the property. There was and we had an environmental check. There was nothing on that property. There was no leakage, no seepage, no nothing. We were fortunate. However, I don't know how any other junkyard would be, but I have to tell you, that's why that article was written. And I have to say, it probably should have been a little bit more extensive than what we have right now. That's it, just a little bit of history for you guys.
Okay, I'm gonna go back to the planning board. Did you
That's good.
want to be able to answer questions, or? You're both raising your hands, so you had points to make, obviously.
I'd actually just like to point out, in section 3.3, as Derek has quoted in his letter, that on the third line from the top of that paragraph on section 3.3, it has a colon and it says, or a use that is not permitted under this ordinance. So what that basically is stating is that the zoning code enforcement officer shall determine whether it fits by right, by special exception, conditional use permit, or that it is not a permitted use under this ordinance. So the point that I'm trying to make is that he does not have to make a determination that it fits into a specific use that is listed on the zoning use of the permitted use table. He can make a determination that it is not a permitted use. And so
How would,
the planning board had determined that that was the error, one of the errors that had been done, is that he could have, and they didn't state that they thought he was wrong for, trying to fit it into a specific use, but they just felt that he had made the wrong decision, one way or the other, so.
Could have he been challenged if he had said it's not a permitted use? Could there have been a?
Anytime I make a decision, it
It's
can
a
be
challenge.
appealed to this.
and that's what the planning board is here tonight.
Okay.
And if an applicant came forward and asked the same question for a specific piece of property, and he made this determination, they could be challenged as well. That you bring up that or a use that is not permitted under this ordinance, so wouldn't that be the example he gave for a manufactured home? That he would say to the applicant, you want to put a manufactured home in residential one, we're looking at the zoning ordinance 311G, that's not the right one, but in 311, it is not a permitted use.
I think,
That's where we're looking.
I think that language in the ordinance helps him make his decision because it specifically calls out that it's not permitted use. However, I don't think it precludes him from making the determination that it's not a permitted use.
Do you believe the definition of a junkyard in the front matter of the zoning ordinance identifies that it is not a permitted use?
Yes, I do.
Despite the words not being in there, not a permitted use?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So if, going back to your application, or the planning board's application, you referenced the master plan and the developmental regulations. I may believe that Derek may have to look at the master plan. Is it his responsibility to look at the developmental regulations when he makes a determination like this?
Well,
that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of. However, the planning board does review that, and ultimately, the planning board is the one who decides what goes in and out of the ordinance itself as well. And so...
For the voters, do you mean?
The planning board does the recommendation as to what goes in it, and then the voters approve it or not.
Okay.
But the planning board did feel that that was an important part of the application. That it should take into consideration what's in the development regulations and in the ordinance.
So my preparation for the application, I actually found the same reference that Derek mentioned on, my question I asked myself, so is there anything in here that in any zone is not permitted? And there was only one example, and that was manufactured homes. It's a specific line item to a principal use and to a specific purpose, and it specifically states it's not permitted in any zone under a special exception, conditionally used, or principal by right. But I don't see the same thing for junkyards. So why the difference? Why do we have it for manufactured homes but not for junkyards?
Well, the hard part about a zoning ordinance is that if you really want to be that specific, it could be a very, very long document. And so part of I guess the trouble with zoning ordinances is you just can't state everything in exact wording because it would take you forever to do.
So if you had the choice of two, and you had to pick one is being manufactured homes and one being junkyards, which one would you rather have a specific line item in there to say it's not allowed, if you don't want it as a town?
To me, I'm not sure if that...
I'm just asking for one of two.
I'm not sure if that question would make a difference to what's at hand right now. I think...
Sure, but the town voted and believed that manufactured homes was a bigger problem. So, I'll go to the next question. So what is the process that would be followed if an application didn't come this way, but came to Derek with a application for a specific piece of property in a specific zone to put in a salvage auto broker for use? What should Derek have said?
That it's not a permitted use in the ordinance, and that if they wanted to be able to do it, they would have to get an amendment process through the planning board to have the zoning ordinance allow it.
So you don't believe that he has the authority to apply, or are you saying because it's a junkyard, or because I didn't ask for a junkyard, it's a salvage auto broker, and that's what they want to do, that it's a misapplication that it should be called a junkyard, is what you're saying?
Well, Right, one of our arguments is that it is the junkyard.
Okay,
And
so-
that's per the Goffstown's definition.
Okay,
So-
I'll stipulate that said, okay, it's a junkyard because of the definition that it's two or more vehicles, not from, that are for sale or not to be used, not gonna be registered, you know, for a period of time, they're gonna be transferred off to somebody else. Okay, it's a junkyard. So he should automatically, with that definition that it's a junkyard, he can't go, it's not his responsibility to look at any of the 3.11 paragraphs and determine what the closest to?
I feel that it is his responsibility to look through the table to see what it closely resembles, if it can be resembled to anything. However, he can always make a determination that it doesn't closely resemble any of those uses, and that's what the planning board felt that he did.
Is the planning board aware of any previous application that Derek or any previous zoning code enforcement officers stated allowed? It's not in there, it's not specifically addressed. I can't make a judgment, and I'm gonna stop it here. There is no process to go forward.
I am not aware of such a determination that he's made that was inconsistent with what they've wanted. However, Mr. Eaton may be aware, I'm not sure.
So
I haven't been here very long, so
I understand.
I have to use
I'm
that
asking
caveat sometimes.
hypotheticals. So if he came out and said, I'm sorry, it's a junkyard, it is not allowed in any zoning district in Goffstown, that ends it?
Yeah.
So the town has stated there is no junkyards.
That's correct. That's the
Well-
easy answer.
No, I'm asking questions, hang on.
Go ahead.
Well, again, and I want to bring up the issue that I brought before, in that Derek can state what he wants to state, but it is not the bullet at the end of the sentence, because the landowner, number one, has to file an application in front of this board to make a decision as to whether or not the application will be approved or denied. So therefore, Derek could write, as far as I'm concerned, Derek can write what he wants to write, and we're now discussing whether his opinion was correct. And I think we're also discussing whether or not he should have written it in the first place, because there was no application in-house. And I think that that's exactly what Al Yaton was saying. And I believe, and this is it, the reason that he cannot be above this board. Derek is not above this board. We are the decision makers as to what we feel the ordinances of this town are. And if he wrote such a response back to Attorney Panziaco, and he wrote an opinion back to her, so be it. If they find a landowner that wants to come forward because they feel, because of Derek's opinion, that this is an approved, or can be an approved or an acceptable within our ordinances, that's up to her to make that determination if she wants to. But that is not the determination of the application. We hold that right. We are the board members. We are the only people that make the final decision at this town level as to what we feel our ordinances say. Now,
And just to answer that specific statement, I just asked the planning board representative if they came to us, and Derek said no, that it wasn't permitted in Goffstown. It's a junkyard. They have no right to come to the board. That's what the planning board representative just said.
well, then, I would strongly suggest that the zoning board, if they felt in their own opinion that this junkyard was not a permitted use, that we would do what the planning board has done and they have come back to us they have appealed Derek's decision, then we would appeal it at the planning board level. And we would appeal to them and say, you need to bring it over here, we don't agree with it.
We just don't have a process that does that. We don't have a process to catch all, just a minute, Derek, I'm gonna come
Well,
back.
I'm not sure if we don't.
No.
I'm very concerned about what Al Yaton said about whether or not these type of opinions, somebody can give a statement, but an opinion, for him to have opinionated a situation prior to an application being here, I think is a point that was brought up that's a good point to pay attention to. And, if Derek wants to write an email back and say, look, this is the way I look at it,
Unfortunately, it's done, unfortunately or unfortunately, I think it's fortunately, because we paid Derek, in his mind, or in our mind, a lot of money
right.
to do exactly that. He speaks on behalf of the board every day, and we never hear of it.
Well, and there are
Never
some,
hear it.
and I can understand, and this is an issue that I personally will put on the table, is that there are some small issues that come before Derek for his opinion to be made, and that his advice be given. I get a bit concerned when we have issues that are of this magnitude, when it isn't when Derek doesn't bring it to the board to maybe have a discussion or a workshop or something about it prior to putting out such a formal opinion. And that's a workshop issue or something, but it kind of puts everybody in an uneasy and uncomfortable situation when you have these large issues like this, which are concerning, and we're all now involved in it.
And there's still a lot of time to ask a lot of questions. Anybody else have more questions for the planning board? Okay.
Some thoughts, but no
Okay,
questions
no
at
questions.
this
Yeah,
point.
it's,
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I just want, for this to be brought up, there's gotta be an application that's gonna be brought forth.
I don't know. Mr. Eaton, did you have any follow-up? Because Derek had his hand raised, so we're gonna come back to him.
You can speak while I'm sitting here, that's fine. I'm not too worried about that.
No, I mean, I was just gonna speak to what Kathy was talking
Oh.
in. Unfortunately, the zoning board is not the interpreter of the zoning ordinance. The zoning board is an appellate board, and your authority comes straight out of statute, and you're called upon in cases like this. You're an appellate board, that's what you are, not necessarily an interpreter of the ordinance. You are called on at times to interpret the ordinance, but overall, you're an appellate board.
Just as a little history on junkyards, I think we have one active one in town that has severe environmental problems as we sit here. That's one of the reasons why adjacent sites have not been developed, is because of groundwater contamination. So to say that things don't happen is not so. And I don't mean any disrespect against the facility up there, but they have their own problems that
I understand, I
occurred
know
for
about
many
him.
years of active use on that
Right.
site. The master plan, the development regulations, and the zoning ordinance have all been written with the intent of the board's determination that junkyards are not allowed in this community, period. That is their intent. That is the way the ordinance was written. And as has been said before, there was some extreme action in the 80s, reference this kind of facility, and it's been on the books for over 25 years. And it was a public vote at that time, too. And so, in essence, we're talking about the public's right and interpretation. So the interpretation is, what is this facility as described? And we have defined junkyards as the storage of any more than 2 unregistered vehicles, period. And it's an all-encompassing practice to mean that anybody, I'm talking, if I had 2 unregistered vehicles in my yard, I fall under this also. It's considered a junkyard. It is one way to deal with not having vehicles being left unregistered, unused, unroadworthy, scattered around town on multiple sites, and creating not just a a hazard, but also, from a planning standpoint, eyesore. But I go right back to the original. In 37 years of being a professional practice, I cannot get an opinion without making a written application on something that's real. Period. I can call somebody and ask them, I can meet with somebody and get their opinion, but until I make the official move, you can't get a written opinion, period. And that's one of the board's thing, and the other thing is, we can prohibit by law any activity in town if it's written in the ordinance. And it's written in the ordinance, no junkyard. We've classified it, we've defined it. We've done what the RSA tells us we have to do.
Mr. Eaton, can you tell me where in here where it says no junkyard period?
Yeah. No, it doesn't say no junkyard period, but the effort
we
here
defined
is to say, we define what a junkyard is.
I agree with you there. We do define what a junkyard is. However, I agree with Kevin, there is nowhere in here that it says no junkyard, no salvage yard. There is no ordinance that I can see.
And I don't believe it's the intent of the ordinance, other than
I don't even see
to
intent, to be
specifically
honest.
say that something is not permitted. It's up to an applicant to apply. It's up for the judicial process to determine whether it's allowed, where and how. And there's two different activities that take place. One is if it's in the zoning ordinance and it's allowed, it may be by particular conditions. If it's not allowed, it's just, and it's not there, it's not allowed.
So you don't agree with Derek's statement and assertion that this is a statement, whatever it is, whatever his determination be, whether it's valued or not, that when somebody comes back with an application that mirrors the statements, the kind of activity that were described, but identified a zone and a specific piece of property, that do you not believe that he would apply the zoning ordinance in accordance with
I would
section
hope that he would
3.3?
not.
That he wouldn't go back to
That he
3.3
would-
and look at it?
He would not reach the same conclusion.
But do you agree that his responsibility and his statement that said he would review it in accordance with 3.3?
Oh, yes, I think he has to,
All right.
without question. I don't think he did anything wrong. I just don't think that it was appropriate because there's nothing specific. There's no application. There's no truth to the matter.
Did the planning board speak to that in its August meeting? Because the application, the appeal that you have doesn't reference that finding, that he erred and even provided an opinion. In here, it speaks to why his opinion was wrong. It doesn't say why he shouldn't have made it, this opinion. Not that you can't provide a verbal, I'm just saying, it seemed to be the principal issue that it was
It was
wrong.
an hour-long discussion at the planning board at the first of the meeting, and I think every member of the board, without exception, other than the selectman, Devanza, was of the opinion his was financial. I don't know what that means when somebody recuses them for financial responsibility. I think it's an excuse for not saying yes or no. That's my professional opinion. But the answer to the question is, the board members were unanimous in their decision to come back to this board and appeal Derek's decision. It was not, I don't believe it, it was unanimous, without question. And that was after an hour-long discussion. That was after going through all the ordinance and looking at the applications that we had over the last 25 years, because we have, a member of the board has been here that long on the board, on the planning board. And they cannot recall any instance of this kind of nature occurring before. This is a whole new territory for everybody.
Do you disagree that there should even be a process to consider it?
The process is one whereby, if there's a real applicant, they have a responsibility to their client to investigate, ask questions, get an answer or some direction from folks to make sure that their application is true. But the applicant is the only real adjudicator at that time of whether he thinks it's okay or not, until someone says no or yes.
So we have a lot of hypotheticals tonight. So consider that an applicant had an attorney, came forward with the application as specified, identified as a zone and a piece of property, came to Derek, which Derek have done, said, it's a junkyard is not permitted by any items in 3.11, go away.
I don't say about go away, but
Well, and there's a process, so he
They-
identified a process.
that's correct. And they have a process to appeal that decision, and that's here.
Just to say that there was no process?
No, no. If they're not, if Derek says that the salvage yard or I'll call it a junkyard is not permitted, they have a right to appeal to this board at that point.
And what relief would they be seeking?
They would be seeking the relief to be allowed a junkyard in the town of Goffstown.
To be filed, and we would use what process to determine whether or not, if we said, you're right, you have the right to be heard, what process should we follow? And the answer would be?
It is up to the applicant.
I'm asking Mr. Eaton.
He has to make an application, it's up to the application to prove his case to you.
Under what criteria?
Under the 5 criteria or 6 criteria.
Against what item in paragraph 3.11?
I don't know what 3.11.
3.11 is the table of principal uses.
Okay.
So which one should they be saying it's most similar to?
They don't.
They just say, I want to do it.
You just say, I want a junkyard, or this is the description of my business. Doesn't
Hang on,
fall
hang on.
under
I
any
wanna get his-
specific classification.
So they don't have to make an association, or it's most similar to,
They might.
or?
I mean, they could be right or wrong. I
So
could
there
be
is a
right or wrong.
process.
There is a process, yes.
So we don't want to ease that process by him saying, I'm going to identify to you what the process would be ahead of time, that you don't have to go through this wall the first time. So Goffstown created a wall?
As an applicant to the zoning board of adjustment, I'm not sure if anybody has the right, other than the applicant, to determine what paragraphs of the zoning ordinance he's appealing.
Well, as you saw by tonight, most people are not that familiar with the zoning ordinance.
Anybody, I'm not gonna get into that discussion with you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so they don't have, they come to the town for seeking advice, and the town provides them advice. I'm sure the planning board, your planning board staff does the same thing.
Correct.
So,
But we don't always agree with staff,
yeah, I hear you. That's why we're here tonight.
okay? And that's why we're here.
Okay, so I'm just trying to identify if the town can just identify that, you know what, we're not gonna hear it, la, 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 junkyards, we don't wanna hear it.
I don't know. I don't believe you can do that by law.
Okay.
There is a methodology, and I'll be quiet for a
No,
minute.
I've asked too many
Somebody's got their
questions. Gail.
hands raised
If
up.
an applicant came and Derek sent him away saying, we don't allow junkyards, that applicant would have a right himself to make an appeal of an administrative decision, just as the planning board has done here. And they would come in and say they disagree, at which point we would be rehearing it again. I think maybe what it would do on the flip side of maybe what the planning board is looking for, is that it would put the applicant on notice that the junkyards are not desirable here, and that there would be more of a challenge to get it than maybe what they're thinking there is by getting the opinion that they got from Derek.
That's a valid point, absolutely. Lynn?
And I guess that's, which grounds are we being asked to decide this on tonight? The process of whether Derek should have issued an advisory opinion in the first instance, or that the opinion that he issued was wrong, which is what I see in the planning board's appeal, which goes to the substantive points of it.
I believe we can do it and. We can address both items.
I mean, because some of the thoughts that I've been having while I've been listening to this argument, the planning board's definition of junkyard stops at 2 motor vehicles, period. If you read Derek's analysis, which was significantly more extensive than that, including citing the RSA of what constitutes a junk motor vehicle dealer, they all include disassembly, sale of used parts, receiving scrap metal, other portions of it. I found his analysis very lucid. I'm not saying that I agree totally with it, but I think that, we can't stop there. If my son's got two junk, as I believe Alan said before, if my son's got two junk cars in my driveway, am I a junkyard? And, by the way, I live in a manufactured home in an R1 zone, so I'm probably illegal too.
I didn't want to say anything, but I know where you live.
Yes. Yes, we've seen you there picking blueberries.
That's right, I have.
You're not the code enforcement officer.
No, I'm not.
You know, as I say, I think we have to consider a little bit more extensively the definition. You know, and granted, we don't want to encourage junkyard, but also do we not want to encourage, you know, Derek in his other roles, if a developer comes looking for advice on whether they've got a business to locate in town, if we say no advisory opinions, you know, maybe the next one isn't a junkyard. You know, I just think we need to dig deeper into the issue. I don't think that, you know, we're taking all the points of the analysis into consideration.
The Goffstown Planning Board is seeking an appeal from administrative classification of use made by the zoning code enforcement officer.
Right.
So the appeal that they're looking for us is, for us to agree whether or not Derek has classified this correctly.
Correct. And then they verbally
Correct.
made the statement that.
But the question was, what are we looking, and that, the answer to me is right there in
I
what
think
it
we can
is.
basically rule on both points.
Um,
Mr. Eaton?
But just as a final comment, our definition of junkyard is rather extensive compared to any other definition in the ordinance. And that's for a reason, is that by the definition, we were trying to cover any possibilities and under any consideration, any particular operation, all the various scenarios that someone might be using automobiles and trucks for, in terms of afterlife, if you want to call it. And I think it was quite specific, and I know this was a large topic of discussion when this definition was amended to add these. It was, used to be just a simple sentence, and it was extrapolated in a more defined definition in different categories. I think there's 3 different categories, so 3 different ors in this paragraph.
Yeah. Takes a lawyer to really understand it.
And I'm not one of those, thank goodness.
I just pretend to be.
I think it's pretty explicit here where it says, here, motor vehicle junkyard shall also include any place of business or storage or deposit of motor vehicles purchased for the purpose of dismantling the vehicles for parts or for use of the metal for scrap where it is intended to burn material which are parts of motor vehicles or cut up parts thereof. And the attorney's letter says specifically that he's buying these vehicles for the intent of them eventually buying, the vehicles are coming there from insurance companies. They're gonna go on the lot, and they're gonna go there for the intention of them going forward to be scrapped
Dismantled.
and dismantled.
So,
So I would.
But not on site.
Well, it's not specific to that.
That's right.
It's not, the verbiage is not specific to
Or
whether it's
request.
on-site or off-site.
requested.
It says vehicles purchased for the purpose of dismantling the vehicles for parts.
You're reading the definition of a junkyard.
Motor vehicle junkyard.
Yeah, the application itself, or not the application, but the question itself spoke to that, what they were going to do.
And, again, because, and I go back to my initial statement, because the ordinances have taken the time to define what a junkyard is, that I don't feel that that this opinion is correct. I think that it is a junkyard and that it is not allowed.
Well, we can ask the question. Derek?
Yes.
In what they applied, what they stated the activity would have been, by definition, in the Goffstown zoning ordinance, would junkyard be applicable to what they want to do? The definition of, not necessarily how 3.11 works it, but the definition of.
I think I addressed that on page 3, where at that time, at the bottom of page 3, that it was not similar in characteristic, function, or intensity of use of the definition. And I spelled out why I believe that, but then again, on number 6, I put the caveat that, even if you did think it was a junkyard, junkyards are not within the table of principal uses, so I think I straddled the fence on that one.
I see that. So he spoke to that, whether or not, he did not believe that, it didn't matter that it was in the
Yeah,
definition.
and that's what I determined is, even if you say it's a junkyard, junkyard's not in the table of principal use. And under my analysis at that time was, okay, what's the most similar?
And required by 3.3 and 3.3.1, you applied the table of principal uses. Okay, any last questions for the planning board representatives or Derek? Before we make a determination? Thank you, Mr. Eaton.
Thank you.
All right, but we'll close the, well, I don't know if there's really a public hearing. is there? Any comments, points, motions?
Well, again, for the third time stay, because it is and has been mentioned in the zoning ordinances, because it does state what a junkyard is, that we have taken it to the point to be specific in the definition of a motor vehicle junkyard. And in reading what is coming over, they are nothing but junk. That, in fact, the ordinances do address junkyards. They are not permitted, and that's why they are not listed into principal uses.
Any motions?
The salvage automobile broker is another term for junkyard.
I think, Ms. Blondie, I'm gonna ask that you not participate in the deliberations at this point. 'cause
Oh, I'm
we're-
sorry.
We've always
When-
allowed
No.
alternates to speak.
We've
No, we've not.
received
Speak for me.
guidance that it should only be voting members at the deliberative
Right.
Right,
portion.
that they can ask, well, it's been for a number of months, I know, but
Well, we're not gonna
The training.
discuss it right now. If it's different, we'll
you should definitely participate in the a question and answer during the public
Right.
hearing,
That's the way it's been
I'm
for a
not
long
making a
time.
decision.
but in actually the voting and the deliberation and determination of vote. I apologize, but I try not to be rude.
No, that's okay. Well, feel free.
Well, I had mentioned to her that she was allowed to, on the way in, that we've always allowed people to talk throughout everything, but they're not allowed to vote. So, I mean, there might have been things that she might have been waiting to say at deliberation.
Even on a recent one with Joanne, she stayed out of deliberation. Not too long ago.
Okay.
Is there any motions? 30 seconds before I make one.
I'll make a
I'd rather not
I'll
make one.
I'll make a motion to,
Now, what they're, that they're appealing Derek's decision,
Mhm.
so you would have to say
I make.
that Derek erred in whatever,
I
or agreed with Derek, I mean,
No, I'm going to make a motion that Derek erred in his administrative classification of the use, that is referred to by Patricia Panseco, in his classification
Oh, in his class, okay.
of his classification of sale or rental of motor vehicle, boats, trailers, and recreational vehicles, being in that category. I believe that the classification for a salvage automobile broker could also be classified as a junk automobile broker. And it should be denied because the ordinances define junkyard motor vehicles specifically, and that these vehicles are being purchased for the purpose of dismantling the vehicles for parts.
And should be denied, what should be denied?
the classification, the categorization of this type of business as presented by Anciaco is incorrect, being categorized as a sale or rental of motor vehicles, boats, trailers, and recreational vehicles in our ordinances. Because I feel that the categorization of the business as prevented falls under the description of the junkyard motor vehicles, as in their own words, that state that it shall also include any place of business or storage or deposit of motor vehicles purchased for the purpose of dismantling the vehicles for parts. And it does say or storage. This is specifically storage of junk vehicles and therefore falls under the termination of motor vehicle junkyards in our ordinance.
So, just to clarify, are we denying the appeal, or are we?
No, I am.
You're agreeing with the appeal that
I am
they're
agreeing with the planning
Appeal.
board, right.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so Kathy's motion was to, agree with the planning board, agree with the appellant, that Derek erred in making a determination that this was a salvage auto broker, and that they would follow the procedure as he identified to, if such an application came forward. That's,
As defined in the definitions of a motor vehicle junkyard.
any discussion, any seconds?
No second.
Okay, any discussion? My discussion is that, I think that, one is Derek has a tough job that he has to do, and looking through the zoning ordinance, and that he is the front line of people coming to him for help, to identify what they want to do. He steers them in a direction that they can have a process. A process that is reasonable, that looks at principal uses, accessory uses, districts, that people can surely see what they are allowed to and not allowed to do in a district. I think it wasn't part of your motion, that I think Derek, although you may have treated it, this was as administrative determination that followed the same rules, that is maybe not the original intent of paragraph 3.3. I think that he's wise, and that when they come through with an application, that he would reapply 3.3 freshly. So I don't think that was an issue. As far as his specific decision, it's not on the table of principal uses. Frankly, not there. Manufactured homes is, by goodness, that one's in there. And when they look at the weight of which one's more important, I don't know which one's more important either, but the point is, manufactured homes was specifically denied in every zoning district in Goffstown. Junkyards, silent, other than for the definition in the front matter of the zoning ordinance. Yep, I clearly know what a junkyard is. Where is it allowed? I don't know. Doesn't say. Doesn't say it in the principal uses. So, Derek, applying 3.3 literally in the fact that if it's not identified in the table of principal uses, and I'm just gonna make sure I have that statement in there. Classification of uses not specified or changes in use. In the event that a proposed use is not specified in the table of principal uses or table of accessory uses upon written application by the landowner, Derek shall determine the administrative classification of the proposed use and whether use is a use permitted by right, etc. So this not being specifically in the table of principal uses or table of accessory uses, it's his duty to make that determination. Now, we can all agree, disagree, and the determination he made, which is what that application that came forward, that it applies, but the appellates basically speak to it wasn't right, but they didn't provide an alternate that I saw, an alternate that he should have applied it to. Should it have been something? They just said it's not in there, it's not allowed. Derek's determination is, I've gotta make it fit. Or he says, it doesn't fit. But he didn't say that. He says, it's not in there. I'm making it this one. This one's the closest. So I disagree with the motion as stated. I think he did what he's required to do. Doesn't say he agrees with the position that he wants a junkyard to be put in. He says there's a process, and the process is, in this case, you're gonna have to seek a special exception for it to be in the commercial, flex zone, or industrial area. All other areas, it's not allowed, period. It's up to you, go forward. Len?
I'd also like to say, I disagree with the motion. I think that Derek made a good faith effort based on a request from an attorney for an advisory interpretation. In reading the lengthy analysis, I feel it was a correct determination based on what was before him. I think some of the things that we've said about, well, this equals junkyard, you know, it sort of begs the definition. I mean, I just don't feel that it's a motion that I can vote for because, you know, I think obviously there's a long process even if you get a classification that says by special exception here. You've still got to go through this board again to get it granted. But I just, you know, I think the determination was correct based on what was before him and what was requested. And process, I think, is the part that we maybe need to talk about, as Kathy stated before, in a workshop, as to what the appropriate response to this type of informational request is. But, you know, I disagree with the motion.
I also have to say that, I think Derek's in a tough spot. I think the discussion tonight has been very much opinion-based. There is intent by the zoning ordinances with respect to junkyards. However, I agree that Derek is in a position where he can't deal with intents, he can't deal with opinions, he can't deal with personal preferences. He's got to deal with what we have here in black and white. And as much as I feel a salvage yard is a junkyard because I deal with it in aviation, I deal with it in marine applications. We have ordinances here that say we define a junkyard, but we don't make it illegal to have. So I too have to say that I can't vote for this motion either. Again, he's got to deal with what he's got here, and I feel that based on the information he was working with, he made a good decision. A tough one, but I think I probably would have made the same one. That I've been interpreting it based on what I had to work with.
Any other comments? I think everybody made very good arguments and walked through the criteria and from all parties, Derek and the planning board, and for and against. We haven't voted yet, but well thought out. Any last comments? With that, there's a motion on the floor and a second to agree with the planning board's appeal and to disagree with Derek's interpretation. All those in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Point of order, meaning as far as yea or nay.
A yea would
Uphold the appeal?
uphold the appeal.
Okay.
And all right, so we need to redo that. So those, all in favor of those to uphold the appeal, say aye.
Aye.
Those denying the appeal, say nay.
Nay.
2 to 3. All right, so the motion failed. The issue is still open on the table. Any other motions? I'll make a motion that to deny the appeal. Although I agree that this is the definition of a junkyard in the case that Derek dealt with, that the opinion that he reached and how the process would be determined was sound. So I recommend that we deny the appeal.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay?
3 to 2. Okay. Here we are. Thank you. So that looks to be the last item on the agenda for the Zoning Board of Adjustment for September 7th. Derek, was there any last items?
No, there was no other correspondence that came in, for the meeting.
Okay. Anything else from the board? Motions to adjourn?
So moved.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I'll check.
Well, yeah, well, we're gonna make you yes, you can vote on the dismissal. Okay, good evening. It was 10:30, not so bad. So all those in favor of dismissal, say aye. Opposed, abstained. 5-0. For what day, 5th or so?